and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIU welcomes anyone regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIU welcomes anyone regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIIU welcomes anyone, regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIIU welcomes anyone, regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIIU welcomes anyone, regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIIU students and are occupying our dormitories. At IIIU, they study with professors, lecturers, academics, and researchers who have experience teaching in world campuses and graduates from well-known universities in Asia, America, Europe, the Middle East, and Australia. With strong support from the government of Indonesia, IIIU continues to build infrastructure, management, faculty and library buildings, lecturer housing, dormitories, sports facilities, reforestation programs, and much, much more. We believe we can grow bigger than our dreams and hopes. We strive to continue to make improvements through various innovations, collaborations, as well as dialogue with students, lecturers, and staff in carrying out the university's vision and mission. Come to IIIU and join future leaders from various countries to seek knowledge to the ends of the earth. Welcome to Indonesian International Islamic University. Established on June 5th, 2018. This campus is expected to be a place for the growth of faith and humanity. We recognize truth and humanity as our motto because we believe that Islamic values and humanity are always connected.
As an inclusive campus, IIIU welcomes anyone, regardless of differences in religious background, ethnicity, culture, gender, age, and abilities.
Delivering an international standard education, IIIU is the only university in Indonesia that focuses on postgraduate education, namely master's and doctoral programs, since its establishment. In this campus, students learn their skills and deepen their knowledge in the fields of Islam, social sciences, economics and business, education, law, science and technology, and the arts. IIIU is determined to help talented young people from all over the world, so this campus is made for talented youths to flourish. Thus, hundreds of prestigious young students from 5 continents have been registered as IIIU students and are occupying our dormitories.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those Ladies and gentlemen, those who have completed registration and may still be outside the hall, please make your way in, as the opening ceremony will commence in just a few minutes.
Gentle reminder, kindly proceed into the hall and be seated. We appreciate your cooperation in helping us begin on time and in an orderly manner. As we prepare to begin, ladies and gentlemen, we are now moments away from the official opening of today's conference. At this time, we kindly request that all mobile phones and electronic devices be switched to silent mode to avoid any interruptions during the program. Thank you very much for your attention and cooperation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
A pleasant morning to all distinguished guests, respected speakers, and esteemed participants. It is with great pleasure and honor that we welcome you to the 4th International Conference on Muslim World Economy and Business, ICMWEB and Call for Paper 2025. It is an annual event hosted by the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia.
The Honorable Rector of Universitas Islam International Indonesia, Professor Jamhari, Chairman of the Academic Senate, Dr. Rifki Muna, Vice Rector for Planning, Finance and Business Development, Professor Amsal Bakhtiar, Secretary of the University, Dr. Haidir S. Bamualim, Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Professor Dian Mashita,
our esteemed keynote speaker, Emeritus Professor of Economics, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, and also as a former Governor of Central Bank of Indonesia, Professor Joseph Sudrajat Jiwandono. Good morning, Prof. And also respected moderators and panelists, distinguished guests, fellow academics, colleagues, and participants. Ladies and gentlemen from various institutions and countries are joining us in this hall and virtually. Welcome and thank you for being with us today.
The theme of this year's conference is Navigating the New Protectionism, Global South and Muslim World Economies in the New Trump Era, a theme that is not only timely, but also critically important, as it explores how emerging and Muslim-majority economies respond to global protectionist trends and shifting economic alliances.
Through this forum, we aim to reflect on today's economic challenges, delve into the role of sustainable finance, and create meaningful exchanges among scholars, professionals, and policymakers. This enables cross-sector dialogue to share insights, foster collaborations, and promote initiatives that support resilient pathways for economic growth.
We are also pleased to announce that academic papers presented at this conference have the opportunity to be published in our peer-reviewed journal, Muslim Business and Economic Review. Ladies and gentlemen, allow us also to introduce ourselves. My name is Rivaldi.
And I, Dewi.
We are truly delighted to serve as your Master of Ceremony throughout the event.
To officially begin today's proceedings, please rise for the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya, followed by the Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia hymn.
Setia berdarah
Now, we are honored to invite the Rector of Universitas Islam International Indonesia to deliver the welcoming remarks. Please welcome Professor Jamhari.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, scholars, policymakers, and participants from across the globe. Good morning and very, very warm welcome to the 4th International Conference on Muslim World Economy and Business here at Universitas Islam International Indonesia. It is an honor to stand before you as the rector of this institution, and I am deeply grateful for your presence as we gather to address one of the most pressing issues of our time under the theme Navigating the New Protectionisms, Global South and Muslim World Economies in the New Era, in the New Trump Era. As a nation, Indonesia has always believed in the power of unity and collaboration to foster peace and prosperity. With my background in anthropology and global politics, I am acutely aware of the challenges and opportunities that lie before us in an increasingly complex world. Picture a global marketplace disrupted by sudden new tariffs. If protectionist policies, such as those anticipated in new Trump era, impose higher tariffs, OIC countries heavily dependent on trade could face significant challenges. Increased import costs and reduced demand for exports like oil and manufactured goods could trigger economic uncertainty, deter investment, and destabilize currencies. To strive, these nations must seek new trade partnership and bolster domestic economic resilience to navigate this turbulent landscape. This is the critical juncture we face, and it is why this conference is so timely and essential. As Nobel laureate in economics Amartya Sen profoundly states, the prosperity of the poor is more noble goal than the prosperity of the rich, end quote. This vision inspires our work today as we seek to build equitable economic systems that uplift the most vulnerable in the Muslim world and beyond. Here in Indonesia, we are proud of our economic resilience. With the Bank of Indonesia Economic Report of 2024, noting that, quote, Indonesia's economy has shown remarkable resilience with GDP growth projected to remain robust and around 5% in 2025. Driven by strong domestic consumption and increasing foreign investment in sustainable sectors, end quote. This strength positions Indonesia to lead in fostering South-South cooperation and sustainable development. Here at Universitas Islam International Indonesia, we are committed to contributing to the world peace and advancing economic development, particularly for the Global South. This conference is testament to that commitment. Over the next 2 days, we will critically examine how Muslim world economies can navigate this new era of global economic fragmentation. We will explore pathways for strategic self-reliance, strengthen South-South cooperation, and reimagine economic strategies that prioritize sustainability and equity. We are privileged to be joined by extraordinary lineup of speakers who bring unparalleled expertise to this discussion. Allow me to extend my gratitude to Professor Sudrajat Jiwandono, Emeritus Professor of International Economics and former Governor of Bank Indonesia, whose insight will guide our understanding of global economic dynamics. Mr. Muhammad Lutfi, former Trade Minister of Indonesia, whose leadership in trade policy continue to inspire. Professor Emnias Asadullah, Senior Fellow at IDS, offering a global perspective on development. Professor Sandre Tangavelu from Sunway University, a thought leader in Southeast Asian economics. Mr. Indra Kampono, Executive Vice President at PT Bank Syariah Indonesia, representing the strength of Islamic finance. Mr. Andre Asmoro, Chief Economist at Bank Mandiri, providing critical insights into Indonesia's economic landscape. And Professor Sahara from IPB University, whose expertise will enrich our discussions on sustainable development. Your contribution, alongside the research and ideas shared by our participants, will shape the discourse on how we can build a more resilient and inclusive economic future. And for our students, as we embark on this intellectual journey, I encourage you to engage actively, share bold ideas, and forge connections that transcend borders. Let us seize this opportunity to rethink economic strategies and reaffirm our commitment to a world where peace and prosperity are shared by all. For those presenting papers today and tomorrow, I look forward to innovative perspective you bring to this vital conversation. Once again, welcome to ICMWEB 2025. Let us work together to navigate these challenges and chart a path toward a brighter, more equitable future for the Muslim world and the global South. Thank you, and may our deliberations be fruitful and inspiring. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Professor Jamhari, for the warm and insightful opening.
To bless our event, we now invite Abdurrahman Fakih Mukhlis to lead us in a prayer. And we kindly ask everyone to follow along according for the faith and traditions.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take this moment to ask Allah to provide us with convenience and blessings in each series of events, and to grant us knowledge and wisdom that can guide us, our campus and our countries in a better direction. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمد الشاكرين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده يا ربنا وإلهنا لك الحمد ولك الشكر كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات ويا قاضي الحاجات اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى O Allah, we seek your guidance, piety, purity and prosperity. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا حلالا طيبا مباركا وعملا متقبلا. O Allah, we seek from you beneficial knowledge, abundant and lawful sustenance that is good and blessed, along with deeds that are accepted. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الصعب إذا شئت سهلا فنسألك السهل واليسر والعفو والعافية والمعافاة في كل أمورنا في الدنيا والآخرة. O Allah, nothing is easy except what you make easy. You can make the difficulty easy if you wish. We seek ease, simplicity, forgiveness, well-being, and recovery in all endeavors in this world and the next. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. O Allah, Reveal the truth to us as the truth and enable us to follow it. And show us falsehood as falsehood and empower us to steer clear of it. اللهم انصر إخواننا المجاهدين والمستضعفين في غزة وفي فلسطين. انصرهم نصرا عزيزا مؤزرا يا رب العالمين. O God, support our brothers in Gaza and Palestine. Grant them a glorious and powerful victory, O Allah, the Lord of the worlds. اللهم اجعل هذه الجامعة ومن فيها وما نكتسبه من العلوم رحمة وبركة للعالمين. Make this campus and what we gain from it a blessing for the universe. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى اللهم على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
آمين آمين يا رب العالمين ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, without further ado, let us now listen to the first keynote speech of today's agenda, which will be delivered by Professor Joseph Sudrajat Jiwandono. Professor Jiwandono is a distinguished Indonesian economist and former governor of the Central Bank of Indonesia, serving from 1993 to 1998, where he played a pivotal role during the early stages of the Asian financial crisis. He is currently a senior fellow, emeritus professor of international economics at the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, where he continues to contribute thought leadership on issues of monetary policy, financial stability, and regional economic integration. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Joseph Sudrajat Jiwandono.
Good morning to all of you. It is indeed a great pleasure for me personally to be invited to share with you some of my sort of personal view about the issues of today. Very important one, not necessarily fun to talk about, but it is indeed very important for our national development, for our trade policy, and for our authorities responsible in this sector. So thank you very much, especially to Papa President of this university, for all the professors and lecturers and some students, both from Indonesia as well as from abroad. Indeed, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you for this occasion. Ladies and gentlemen, discussing this topic on how to respond to, in my term, somewhat weird policy of raising import tariff against global export entering the US is at least not a piece of cake that we all enjoy to taste, and not even just academic exercise, but surely require cool thinking and serious analysis of seeing related aspects that in this intertwined global relation to no country could ignore. In short, it is a very difficult subject to discuss indeed. And I do not pretend to master the subject at all, even if I have some tools of analysis as a monetary and international economist with some experiences in the government bureaucracy, studied as working with the National Development Planning Board, Bappenas, being assistant to the Trade Minister and assistant to Minister Coordinator of Economic Affairs. And then later on, for 5 years, I was Junior Minister of Trade in President Suharto Cabinet, and finally as a Central Bank Governor of Indonesia, even though it was ended with a little bit tragic when I was fired by President because of difference of policies. I commit the cardinal sin when during the financial crisis of 97, 98, when I closed down 16 banks, 3 of the banks belong to the relative of the president. That was the cardinal sin. So I got the implication of the unrake of the family, and I was fired only about maybe 6 weeks before my terms was over. However, I just kept quiet. I didn't make any protests because actually President Suharto was agreeing with me. He didn't change my decision at all. All the banks that are being closed kept closed. So that was what I'm happy about the president, no matter how other people would say. All right, let me right now talk to the focus of the conference. In the beginning, my reaction to the tariff policy of President Trump was that he and his team might learn from the past history of America itself, which was happening maybe about 100 years before President Trump. During the presidency of McKinley, he actually implemented also an increase of import tariff to the world. And it was a little bit successful, actually. It helped the American economy growing. But what maybe President Trump and his economic team forgetting was that the condition then was completely different from the time President Trump was in office. In the 100 years before, the relation between the US and the rest of the world was a dependency kind of relation. All the other countries almost depended on the US manufacturing development. So no matter what the US did, the other country couldn't retaliate in anything. However, during the Trump presidency, even in his first one, he couldn't do it without other people, other countries retaliate to what President Trump did to others. And that was exactly how it happened. And in that respect, President Trump and his advisor also didn't learn from what happens in the 30s, when again, during the other president's presidency, President Herbert Hoover, they also implemented what is called a Smith and Hawley Act, raising tariff import, and the result was a depression of the economy of the US, but not just for the US, for the world. In 1933, the world experienced a depression preceded by a crash in Wall Street in 1929. And economists, I don't know why, love to use the word great, even though it's nothing great at all. It described the 1929 Wall Street crash, the Great Crash. There's even a book written by Professor Galbraith of Harvard a long time ago with exactly that title, The Great Crash of 1929. So the depression was the Great Depression. And during the heyday of the American economy, when the chair of the Fed was held by Mr. Alan Greenspan, he was not even actually finished his dissertation, even though he started, and he is a student of economics at Harvard, but he didn't finish his dissertation. Yet, he was the great Fed chair in the US history. The economy was very robust. Inflation was very much under control. Employment was also very robust. And what did economists say about that period? It was great moderation. So for economists, everything is great. If it is bad, it is great crash, Great Depression. If it is just medium, it is called great moderation. I don't know at this time what kind of greatness about the world economy. So actually I was a little bit too generous in my evaluation about what President Trump and his advisors did. According to the new explanation, which I think is more correct, I get it from different sources. However, again, I want to go back to why I give so much credit to President Trump and his economic team on the policy. Partly was, what can you expect? You see the team was not really bad at all. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Benson, was a well-known health funds manager from Wall Street. His ambassador to the USTR, who negotiate the trading issues, Ambassador Jamison Greer, had a very good education. He got a law degree from Virginia University, not a bad university at all. It's the place of where Thomas Jefferson did his study. And also he did a social study at Sorbonne University, so it's very international. And then what else? President Trump advisor for industry and commerce, Peter Navarro. He got his doctorate from Harvard University in economics. Must not be bad, right? And even his own vice president, J.D. Vance, and his wife, Usha Vance, both of them has a law degree from Yale. And mind you, that Donald Trump himself is supposed to have his MBA from Wharton School, So I think they must have a good brain, right? And I thought I was not wrong in that. But it turned out it was not right. As I said, after my further research, I learned from what it was told by an anchor for the MSNBC, Rachel Meadows, who said that during President Trump's second term, he asked his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to find someone, some economist, who would support his policy for sanctioning China. I don't know why he had some kind of a big grudge against China. And again, I don't know why President Trump always think that the US was so generous that for years, US has always been very helpful to the world, not just to some country, Canada or Mexico, but no, to the world. And according to him, the world treated the US very badly. And now, in his administration, when he said that this is the payback time. So the world has to repay the debt to the US. That is why he said America first. That is why his slogan was Make America Great Again, MAGA. And how to do it? Raise the import tariff. And the way they make decision on how big is the increase was also really very arbitrary. Just look at the amount of the US deficit vis-a-vis the respective countries, and they make a decision. So China, 140%, for instance. EU, 40%. And then come to Asia, we call it Vietnam, 60%. Indonesia, 40%. Singapore, nice guy, 10%. So that's how arbitrary the rate was being decided. So all economics starting to learn in America, we call it 101 economics. They know that if a country is in deficit, it's because it exports too little, spending too much to import. And why? Because the prices of the world goods is much cheaper than the American produced goods. So was the American stupid? No, the policy was stupid. Pardon me to use that language. So again, what do you know? One by one, all the former ally countries, starting with Canada, even during the President Justin Trudeau, he was already make a statement that, look, this policy is ridiculous. We have been flourishing because of the free trade between the two countries. Why did you raise your import tariff? It will only inflict a wound on your open economy. That's what Mr. Trudeau said, and many of the congressmen and women asked the Canadian to start, don't go to the US. And that was a very bad news for the American tourism, because the biggest tourists in the US was coming from Canada. Okay? Even though from other country also, but Canadian is similar to Mexico. The U.S. motor industry imported a lot of things that coming from Mexico very cheaply. But with this, then it is the reverse. And not just that, also immigrants. There are many immigrants from Mexico, from Latin America, who become cheap labor for the U.S., helping so much the farm agriculture sector in the U.S. no longer available because they are afraid to work. Because in the anti-immigrants policy of the U.S., he started to have a program to deport millions of immigrants to wherever he wanted to do. He always said Venezuela. Not necessarily all of them came from Venezuela, but that's what he did. If you listen to what these leaders saying in reacting to President Trump, it was sometimes a little bit funny. You know, President of Mexico is a lady, a very courageous lady, Claudia Sheinbaum. She is always attacking Trump because of this policy. And indeed, because of Canadian and Mexican policy, the U.S. Auto industry was in trouble. Elon Musk, the buddy of Mr. Trump, the rich man in the world who invented, supposed to, Tesla, the first electric car, will become world car for some times, because of this policy, was boycotted by European countries. They no longer want to import Tesla. And what maybe again they didn't realize was that the biggest Tesla production, the plant itself, was put in Shanghai, China. So how stupid could that be? That's why policymakers who went back to her place in the academia, like former Secretary of the Treasury and Fed Chair, Janet Yellen, a professor of University of California in Berkeley, he was saying that President Trump policy is a self-inflicted wound in the economy. It's raising the price, inflation, reducing the employment, etc., etc. So no wonder that three prominent professors, Professor Janet Yellen, Professor Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia, and Professor Larry Summers, the former Secretary of State and former Harvard president, all of them said, we cannot give a passing grade to Trump and his economic team, meaning all these professors failed Trump policy on import. All right. So what did President Trump do? Well, President Trump liked to, I don't know, he almost like talking to himself. So he's thinking that he kept still saying that he is the greatest president, U.S. president in history. President George Washington was only number 2 after him, because he was the number 1. Well, it's a joke, but he said it. I don't know what to say, but that's how this man is saying. It's a little bit strange, but maybe the mistake was not on him, but on the American who elected him for the second time. But how our government responded to all this haphazard kind of policy? I think not because I know the president very well, but I guess the President Prabowo administration responded to the situation very wisely. He sent a team to negotiate with the American authority, and the Indonesian team was one of the first team to be admitted, to be received by the American team. The Indonesian team comprised of Minister Coordinator of Economic Affairs, Mr. Erlangga Hartarto, Dr. Mari Pangestu, former Minister of Trade, and Thomas Siwandono, the Vice Minister of Finance, who happened to be my son. They have met and discussed with both the Secretary Jamison Greer and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. And the discussion I heard was very well. They have not decided on the real result of the negotiation, but first they were very well received, and the negotiation was done in a such very friendly manner. I don't know why, sometimes it's helped, but my son, Thomas, happened to be graduated from the same college as Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Treasury. And of course, you know, when you say, hey, from what year are you? Then you feel like you're a friend, like, and that helped negotiation. That's strange, but true. I myself have some that in terms of the policy in the beginning like an enemy, but later become friends. Like when I was Junior Minister of Trade, I was in charge of multilateral agreement. Then there was no WTO yet. We are negotiating in, using the terms of reference from the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. And our enemy is always the US and the developed economy, who kept accusing us that, hey, your export is not fulfilling the health requirement. Your export is, the production is violating human rights. You are employing underage labor. You are using prisoners to produce your exported goods. That's how they, and I said, even if that's true, I said, you don't understand our culture, that for this young kid, they would rather work than not able to eat. And after all, the product that they produce are the first quality, so what's the problem? For the consumers, actually, there is no complaint at all. But the US kept accusing us of doing things like that. The US trade ambassador at the time was a very tough lawyer. The name was Madam Carla Hill. It was our enemy number one. And my closest colleague at that time was Deputy Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, that later became Prime Minister of Singapore. He always sit beside me, And when we listened to Madam Carla Hill said, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, who was fairly well versed in Indonesian, in our bahasa, he said, Pak, kurang ajar si ibu ini ya. That's the way he talked to me. And again, this lady was very tough, our enemy #1 at that time. When I have in trouble, when I was fired by Pak Harto, because the news was in New York Times, Washington Post, and International Herald Tribune, she wrote me a personal letter saying, Governor, I know you goes to Washington, D.C. quite often. Next time you come to Washington, use one of my room. I have a law office in D.C., and you can use that. You have your PC there, communication, and don't worry about it. You know, when you are down, and then someone whom you think is a scoundrel suddenly offer you some help, you feel so good, right? That's how I felt about that. And also, Pak Lee Hsien Loong, when he became Prime Minister already, and I was already working in Harvard University. I was 3 years with Harvard Institute for International Development as visiting scholar, writing books, and lecturing once in a while. The ambassador was a friend of mine, called me, Pak, the Prime Minister is passing by Cambridge. Would you like to have coffee with him? I said, of course. Because Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong went to Kennedy School for his master degree. So I met with him, we talked about a lot of nonsense, and in the end he said, Pak, why don't you work for in Singapore? And you know, I'm an unemployed person. I'm about to leave Harvard. Someone who is as important as Prime Minister of Singapore offered me a job. I said, okay, invite me. So he asked his secretary, he wrote with his handwriting and gave that letter to me. I brought that to the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, later become Yusuf Ishak Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. And the director also happened to be a friend of mine, Dr. Chia Shuwei at that time. He said, hey, Pa, welcome. You can work here. Consider this as your home. So why not? You know? So I moved and went to Singapore. Actually, just for 1 year. But maybe in the 7th month, another friend came, Ambassador Barry Desker, the Singapore ambassador in Jakarta when I was in Bapanas then, so we were friends for a long time. He came to me and said, Rajat, can you help me setting up master degree and doctoral degree program in international political economy? Because we already have international relation and strategic studies in our school. And I told him, Barry, I am a monetary economist. What do I know about all this? And he said, come on, Rajat, I know you in out of government. You know the stuff. So I worked for like 3 months making this IPE program for master and doctoral program with the help of a Malaysian professor, Professor Helen Mesaduri. And we worked together. In 3 months' time, when we finished, I submitted to Dean Desker, and he put it to the President's office. and it was accepted. That's why I moved to Rajaratnam School, one of the graduate study in NDU. I thought it was for 1 year, 2 years, but I was there for 20 years. So that is story, nothing to do with the subject, but it's how my life make me understand the subject, because all the time I never left the subject away from me. Even when I was working in national planning, Minister of Trade, Governor Sandway, I never missed any semester in giving lecture to my beloved Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia. So that's how the life in academics, in the end, you know, you're combining your passion and your hobby with your career. And if it helps the government or the society, so be it. That is how I see the development. And again, back to the subject, I guess under President Prabowo, the response has been, in my opinion, very commendable. Aside from directly negotiating with the American, before that, Indonesia was joining the BRICS, the Association of the South Economic Power, actually. And our association with BRICS give us some of benefit. Say, for instance, I was a little bit hurt when Indonesia need so much import of rice. Suddenly, India stopped their export to Indonesia. That was hurting. But now when we are in the same associations of BRICS, India would not do that, would not treat like that. Also in other things which we are in need, energy. When I was still in the government, we are a net exporter of energy. Our export of gasoline was on the high octane for the plane. But what our family need was kerosene, minyak tanah, which has a very low kerosene. And because of that, we have to import kerosene by exporting our high octane energy. But now we are net importer. When I was Junior Minister of Trade, I practiced the counter trade with Iran and Iraq, because we are buying kerosene from their oil production, and we sell our coffee, tea, textile, and garment. Our exporters was very happy with that, and as a monetary economist, that counter trade is supposed to be goods versus goods, but as a monetary economist, I changed that. I asked bankers to do something. I told them, hey, you have a business here. If you finance them, you'll get some money. So the banks also participating in this. And the counter trade in my book becoming a regular trade. And if we have to, we can do that now, I think. So I guess I must say that our response to the haphazard Donald Trump tariff policy has been very commendable, starting with head-on talking to them, but also with the BRICS. We are almost like, what do you call it, trying to get our supply very safe. Energy from Russia and rice, if we still need, from neighboring countries. Because, and also one thing that I have to mention was, within BRICS, the payment system was very good for us, because in the BRIC payment system, we recognize national currency. We pay with our own currency when we import. Okay? That means we can save US dollars for our other needs. So joining BRICS is also part of the response to the Trump crazy tariff policy. I guess that doesn't mean that we can now say, oh, we are doing okay. No, we have always watched. I'm always saying, when you are in the government, you have to have some attitude of being eclectic, meaning you always ready to change if the condition asks you to change, whether moving forward, backward, leftward, or rightward, doesn't matter. I'm a tennis player, at least years ago when I was still young. And that's the way a tennis player should do. You always on guard when the ball could come from left, right, or way up. You have to go backward, or you have to go forward. You have to be very nimble. This is my 2 cents advice for Indonesian management to face the very uncertain world due to the Mr. Trump haphazard tariff policy. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I am very honored to be invited and talking to you, sharing with you some of my story. I hope I didn't bore you. The story was not necessarily always economics, but it's the excuse of professor. So always try to make some excuse when you lose of words. You always try to get something, to make joke or whatever. I cannot make joke, but my intention is always good. So, again, thank you very much for your kind attention, and I appreciate for your patience. Thank you. There's one more thing I have to say. I must excuse myself. I am very interested in joining listening to and joining the discussion on the later session, but I'm sorry, I'm leaving for London in the early evening, so I will leave soon after this, because I don't know, I'm old. I'll be 87 soon, but I still like to travel. And one of the objective is to see one of my grandson is in his 2nd year at King's College, Cambridge U. So I want to see him. So thank you very much. And see you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just heard an insightful keynote address from Professor Jiwandono, sharing valuable perspective on global economic dynamic and policy implication. Please, Prof, after this we will have a token of appreciation. So we kindly invite the Rector, Professor Jamhari, to come forward and present the token of appreciation. Okay, give applause. Okay, and we also invite Professor Amsal Bahtiar, Dr. Rifki Muna, and Dr. Haidir Esba Mualim, also Professor Dian Mashita, for photo group session. Please come forward. All right, for the documentation team. Okay? Right. 1, 2, 3, click. Again. 1, 2, 3, click. All right, once again. 1, 2, 3, cheers. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Sudrajat Jiwandono, for your inspiring keynotes. And ladies and gentlemen, due to another commitment and tight schedule from Professor Jiwandono, please be informed that he may need to leave the venue earlier. And thank you for your understanding, and thank you once again to Professor Jiwandono.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, we now proceed to the first panel session of the day, which will be delving into a topic of great global significance, which is global reset, implications of Trump's policies and economic outlook 2025-2026. This session will explore the anticipated shifts in global economic and political landscapes following recent developments in U.S. leadership, particularly the return of Donald Trump to the presidency. The panel will examine how these changes may affect global trade, investment, financial stability, and the broader economic prospects for the coming years.
And to lead this important discussion, we are pleased to welcome our moderator, Dr. Teguh Yudo Wijaksono, Head of the PhD in Economics program at the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia. Dr. Yudo brings a wealth of expertise in macroeconomic research, policy analysis, and development economics. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Teguh Yudo Wijaksono to the stage.
Thank you. So, very good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, distinguished speakers, Pak Rector, and also colleagues and participants of the 4th International Conference on Muslim World Economy and Business. Let me introduce myself. I am Teguh Yudo Wijaksono, and I am really glad to be your moderator for our opening panel with the title Global Reset, Implications of Trump's Policies and Economic Outlook 2025-2026. So before we start, we already listened from Prof. Derajat about the context, but let me give you something to reflect. So if we reflect a little bit about in the past few months into President Trump's second administrations, we are witnessing significant policy shifts that I think are reshaping international trade, supply chains, and also economic relationships worldwide. So as Prof. Derajat mentions about how President Trump brings the idea about the Americas first and also featuring aggressive trade policies like tariff, corporate tax reforms, and also this is another important thing when he changed the way the US and also international engage into the multilateral and rule-based orders. So we think that this presents both challenges and opportunities for the global south and, of course, Muslim majority economies. Now, today we have three excellent experts, speakers that help us to understand the current situations and understand this dynamic landscape and about how President Trump's policy might affect the global trade patterns and also how Indonesia and other Muslim countries should respond. Now, let me call our speaker one by one. First, I would like to invite Professor Sandre Tancabelu from Sunway University. Please, Professor Sandre, the next one, I would like to invite Professor Sahara of IPB University to join with us in the stage. And finally, I would like to invite Professor Nias Sadulo of IDEAS. Please. Thank you. So I guess first we can start with Professor Sandre, but before he starts his presentations, let me begin from his background. Professor Sandre currently serves as head or president of the Jeffrey Chah Institute of Southeast Asia at Sunway University in Malaysia. Previously, he held positions at the Institute of International Trade and also Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Adelaide. He has served as trade advisor to Minister of Commerce of Cambodia since 2021, in which you are awarded by the Royal Order of Sawatara by the Royal Government of Cambodia. And his distinguished career includes serving as head of research at Singapore's Ministry of Manpower, and there are many areas that you know positions, so I cannot say one by one. He is also editor of the Asian Economic Journals and has published many papers and also books. He holds a PhD in economics from Queen's University. So, Professor Sandre, time is yours. Let's give him applause.
Thank you, Professor Yudo, my good friend. Thank you for inviting me, Rector, UIII, the administrators and Dean. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a while since we talked, and also pleasantly meeting my friends, Dr. Sahara from IP, and Professor Anis. We met in Malaysia, I think. So it's very pleasant and nice to be here, and pleasantly happy to be in this university. I was so pleasantly surprised and happy to meet Professor, the former governor, because he spent his time in Yusof Ishak School Institute, ISIS, and also with the Rajaratnam School I served as professor at NUS, Economics Department, and I know quite a bit of people that he mentioned, including Prof. Chia, Barry Deska, Ambassador Ong. I worked in the ministry under the Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, but didn't work directly under him, but I worked with many, many other ministers. So today's talk is going to be interesting. I think it's interesting. I will follow up with what the former governor mentioned, the pre-war issues, and then I will try to bring a little bit back into the post-war, and then I will discuss more in terms of the ASEAN, and then try to address what ASEAN is going to do next. Because now there is an ASEAN summit that's going on in KL, and there are some clear directions ASEAN wants to take. But at the same time, we see some emergence of leaders within ASEAN that requires some kind of direction and leadership within ASEAN. Okay, so this is the term of reference given to me by Dr. Professor Yudo on this talk. How long do I have? Professor Yudo, how long do I have? 30 minutes, that's pretty long. Okay, so I actually prepared for 45 minutes, but I will try to manage it within 30 minutes. Normally I prepare. So I will call it Trump reciprocal tariff, which I will call Trump 2.0. And then how to mitigate this global recession. Fairly, we are going to go into recession because all the exports for major countries are already falling, including Japan, Korea, China, even US, and including the ASEAN member countries. So we will see a slowdown. Whether it will lead to a global recession, we are not sure, given the 90-day pause and the other mitigation policies countries are putting in. But I will talk about ASEAN in terms of how you can manage a soft landing. This is part of the paper which I wrote with Professor Christopher Finlay, who was from University of Adelaide, now is in the ANU. We released in the Pacific Economic Council, Cooperation Council, and in terms of how ASEAN can play the role of soft landing. Next slide, please. Do I control the slides or? Okay, let me put a little bit of context into this. The context goes a bit earlier than this. Actually, the person who was championing trade was actually Obama. Clinton Obama, the Democrats were championing trade. At that time, we already realized that there's a shift in the global geopolitics itself. So what ASEAN and East Asia did was we wanted a TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. And after negotiating the TPP with Clinton, that also initiated with Singapore, Goh Chok Tong, and then we pushed the TPP, and when we went to Obama, when Clinton passed on to Obama, or from Bush, I think went to Obama, and Obama was supposed to complete this, and Obama didn't complete because the House and the Senate defeated, or the House defeated the TPP. So then what happened was TPP was very comprehensive. It is an agreement that will bind US to a proper legal law, rule-based and market-based principle of development and growth and trade itself. Given technological changes and many things that's happening, that will leverage US to the next stage and manage a platform with US itself, and with US-centered countries to drive the global growth. But when US left, then becomes CPTPP. Without US, nearly 15 to 20 chapters were frozen, and then we call it CPTPP. So that is the other biggest trading arrangement we have. And then when Trump came back, the whole idea of the trade itself shifted because the electoral base shifted. I will show you the evidence. And then Trump started his Trump 1.0, the tariff war with China, only China, because he was, like the former governor was saying, he was looking for a place where he can discuss about globalization and the discontent US had with respect to global trade itself. I will again show you the evidence. Then when Biden came, Biden realized that the electoral center shifted, so he started Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. The Indo-Pacific framework elevated the tariff. Tariff was still the rule-based, so we still can go to WTO to negotiate and so on. So what Biden did was intensify the whole trade war and started the strategic alliances. Strategic alliances means I still can have one-to-one discussion, and then I can purely put rule-based trade agreements aside. Strategic alliance means even Pacific countries that are strategically located in the Pacific can have more bargaining power than other countries, smaller countries. But remember, rule-based is important. A rule-based defines how small countries can actually engage larger countries. That's why we need the rule-based. Without rule-based, it's much more difficult, and a market-based is very difficult to deal with larger countries itself, especially the countries that have a larger geopolitics agenda. So the rule-based allow us to discuss the geoeconomics and the businesses like the geoeconomics there rather than geopolitics. Because geopolitics without geoeconomics, without market leads to a lot of corruption and inefficiencies. That's what protectionism is all about. And we experienced this during the 1970s with the Latin American countries. They collapsed. So the inward-looking, what you call import substitution policies didn't work. So fairly, from that, we saw the anti-globalization even before Trump or even Obama and Clinton already knew that anti-globalization was actually rising quite significantly even before Trump came. So Trump used that and weaponized this, and even now you weaponize trade as a political agenda. That is the geopolitics itself. So now trade has been weaponized. The weapon he used is what you call tariff, a single dimension of tariff, and he weaponized trade itself. And we don't like that. The rule-based, market-based, de-weaponize most of the things. Because it brings welfare, it becomes technology, self-efficiency, and many things into the dimension. So you cannot weaponize it. So the rule-based creates a more unified and harmonized dimension. So that's the reason why the speech by the former director is important. The big crash. And this is what we observed before the big crash. And then it started the World War II. And then we started managing the geopolitics itself. That's the post-war dimension of starting the UN, WTO, and even World Bank, all based on economics dimension managing the geopolitics. And ASEAN is built on that principle too. We always complain about ASEAN way. ASEAN way is actually use the geoeconomics to manage the geopolitics. Because in 1967, when we started ASEAN, it's because of the 1 or 2 days war that happened, called the Konfrontasi, that occurred, and the war between Singapore, Indonesia, and then Malaysia when colonization stopped in the British land. So we started this framework called ASEAN, and that allowed us to harmonize economic cooperation and manage geoeconomics, and then manage the geopolitics itself. So with Trump coming in, anti-globalization sentiment increasing because trade itself is very uneven. I will show you the evidence. So when we drive the market base and the rule base, we realize that market and rule base only give us the first optimality. First optimality and market efficiency. And when you study economics, the second optimality is important. How we distribute the gains from trade is very, very important for us. And that is the second optimality. And most of the time, when we do all the graduate studies and all the economics, we only work on the first principle. We never spend a lot of time on the second principle, especially in trade. Trade is only very simple. It's only based on a very simple principle. When there are differences, you can exchange. And a market is the best way to exchange and is very efficient, as long as there are differences. Differences can be in resources, in human capital, in technology. As long as there are differences, we can exchange. And these differences is also not static. The static phase is what you call the catching up phase. China catch up with the rest of the world in 20 years. So we can manage a catching up phase. That's what East ASEAN did, called the East ASEAN miracle, using import substitution for export promotion strategy itself. So we can catch up and create a dynamism within ourselves. And then we can create the differences in terms of dynamism, and that is what we call dynamic comparative advantage. So ASEAN, I will show you the evidence, including East Asia, is on the pathway to create a lot of dynamic comparative advantage. The amount of infrastructure you have seen, the fast train you observe from Bandung to Jakarta. Jakarta is the fastest train in East Asia. Fastest train because it's not Laos. Laos only can go to 250. From Kunming to Bhutan all the way to Lao Prabang to Vientiane, the fast train. Laos got the first fast train among ASEAN, but Indonesia is the fastest. And you're talking about from Jakarta going all the way to Surabaya, double the length of what we have from Bandung to Jakarta. And we have ASEAN connectivity. We're going to connect, we're already connecting highway going from all the way from Batam to Singapore, all the way to KL, going all the way up to India and China. It's already been in line. So we're also going to connect from Kunming all the way to Hanoi, Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh will cut to Phnom Penh, and Phnom Penh will cut all the way to Bangkok. And from Vientiane, it will come down to Bangkok. So we're going to have another chain of fast trains. When President Xi went on his trip right after the announcement to Vietnam, then Malaysia, and then to Cambodia, this was also the next stage of elevation. So we're going to see fast trains, we're going to see more integration, we're going to see more cities to grow in this region. And China, I just came back 3 weeks I was in Shenzhen, then I went to Hainan. They are interested to bring this faster. So China is interested to bring the faster integration itself. So the Indo-Pacific and Biden set up the CHIP Act. CHIP Act means anything that's produced in China will not have the kind of support and subsidies coming from US to bring investment back into US itself. But producing in US is very expensive, very expensive. So recently the Taiwanese, the chip maker, the #1 chip maker is investing in US. But that investment is not going to bear any fruits for the next 5 to 8 years. By the time they set up the infrastructure to produce the high-end, high AI-based chip, it will take 5 or 6 years. And US does not have the resources, the essential minerals, or the human capital to drive this. So this is again where the inefficiencies come in. It's not a value chain activity, it's friend-shoring. Friends, we shore inside. So it creates a lot of distortion what Trump has done. And it's not Trump, it's also Biden. Biden has initiated this. And what Trump did in Trump 2.0 is to even weaponize this even further, because his first experiment didn't work very well, because it was only in China. So this in trade we call trade diversion and trade decoupling effect. Trade diversion means most of the ASEAN countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Philippines enjoy the trade diversion coming through here, and trade still went to US. They diverted the trade from to us and to US. So the first experiment to him, it didn't work. So what he did was, he extended and weaponized this even further. And when you look at the Trump 2.0, all the ASEAN countries are listed there, including Singapore, that US has a trade surplus. So countries that are trade surplus are also given 10%. So what their message is sending us is, this is nothing to do with market, this is nothing to do with economics. This is have to do with geopolitics. Because you are in ASEAN, you are in ASEP, you can list all the ASEP, 15 countries are there. New Zealand, Australia. In the Senate hearing, they asked the Secretary of State of Trade, why is Australia included there when you have a trade surplus in Australia? China effect, because they're part of ASEP. They want to dismantle the China effect in the ASEP itself. RCEP is the largest global trading area we have now, and legally binding all the RCEP members to come together, including, and ASEAN centrality is key. So the weaponization becomes very, very important for him because he is driven, Trump is not irrational, he's driven by his electorate. His center, the Mid-Eastern, the center of US is supporting him very strongly. So he might, his party will be re-elected again and again. But the key point is, after Obama left, we already see the trend of not the Trump or Biden, but how the US electorates are reacting to globalization itself, which means that it will be a medium-term to a long-run issue that ASEAN need to handle. So it's not only Trump weaponized, and he also created a difference from Biden. Biden still used the WTO principle to manage. So other than weaponizing trade in terms of tariff, Trump also completely abandoned anything to do with trade and rule-based, which basically means that small countries cannot go and negotiate with them. So when smaller countries go negotiate with the US, larger countries, they will push you to the corner because they will ask for the political dimension more important. So, and that statement already occurred when the shifting point came just before the East ASEAN Summit in Cambodia, when the Vice President Kamala Harris supposed to come for the East ASEAN Summit, and they made a statement that trade is not the highest priority for them. Political and security is the #1 priority for US. And this was not made by Trump, it's made by Biden to push the Indo-Pacific agenda. So what we had was Trump intensified this because his experiment cannot be Biden's. His experiment must be more devastating than Biden itself to show that he's more stronger than Biden. So what he did, he imposed reciprocal tariff. That means he's opening up his market and say, you also can put the tariff on me as I put my tariff on you. That's a reciprocal tariff, two-way. So when he did that, US escalated this and China escalated everything. So on top of that, the reciprocal tariff that came in put all the ASEAN countries, Cambodia 48% or 49%, Vietnam 48%. All these countries are closely linked to China. And the formula they use, it doesn't matter, the formula doesn't make sense. It's nothing to do with trade deficit. No country in the world will have a trade surplus with them unless you are a highly developed country. Theory says that you will experience, developing countries and less developed countries will experience trade deficit unless you are resource rich. That's how the economy is, because we export labor intensive, they export capital intensive. The terms of trade is better to them. They can buy more goods from us than what you can buy from them. So as a trade advisor, I was asked, what can we do with this? We are very open. I want US investment to come. US is not going to come and invest in the economy because you're only labor intensive. What can I go and produce there? I cannot produce anything. The cost is too high. So I will show you this evidence because end of the day, you want to be in public policy, policymakers only move if you show evidence. If you don't show evidence, they're not going to move because there is what you call political risk. There's an institutional risk, political risk, and market risk. So now Trump has increased all the three elements of the risk. The risk is the highest level uncertainty. So market risk you can measure, what we call the futures. So the political risk and policy risk is very critical for policymakers so they don't create too much risk. The 90-day pause is a policy risk. I can't move because in 90 days, even after China and US agreed to bring the tariff down, he announced that another 25% were added to Apple just before the ASEAN Summit. And then he's going to add 50% to European trade because he cannot negotiate with them. Again, market volatility start going, the volatility, the stock prices start going up and down, creating a lot of risk, and a lot of wealth has been lost. The wealth that has been lost is not just the common people, institutional wealth has declined, pensioners' wealth has declined. It's becoming very important for us. So fairly, you can see all the ASEAN member countries, on the average, ASEAN was imposed 36% tariff. And this tariff is an add-on tariff. You know what is an add-on tariff? So whatever I'm paying to US, they add another 46% to that. That's an add-on tariff. But interestingly, they also put out an exemption annex. That means those products listed there also exempted from the tariff. So it's not 46 or 48%, but when you do the recalibration, it actually comes down a little bit. But it's still add-on. So, and the other interesting thing about the tariff, the weaponization, the baseline is no more zero, it's 10%. So that means you need to pay a 10% tax to get into the US market. Straightforward. Even though you're going to negotiate with them, they still will impose the 10%. On top of whatever you're paying, that's an add-on. So again, the reciprocal tariff will have devastating impact. And we think that the abandonment of rule base is more devastating to us than the tariff. Because if you impose a reciprocal tariff, and then you still hold a market base and rule base, we still can bring them to WTO to negotiate. But now, Trump is not interested in WTO to go and negotiate. You can do whatever you want. They already have 100 over lawsuits. They don't care because they don't believe in the rule base. So that without the rule base, ASEAN foundation called ASEAN centrality is shaken. ASEAN centrality is important, and I will discuss a little bit of that one. Okay, so it's created a lot of uncertainty, and it doesn't matter. Immediately you think that going back to US 30% and China going to 10% is going to solve. It doesn't solve anything, because the fundamental problem still exists. That means ASEAN need to consolidate itself. That is the policy discussion we need to have. So the tit for tat is what you call prisoner's dilemma. It will bring us the brink of global recession if they keep pushing this. And rightly pointed out by the former governor, we will move into an equilibrium before the World War II. That is something we're trying to avoid. That's why the title of this talk is how ASEAN can bring the soft landing and avoid such kind of equilibrium. Again, it will raise inflation, US prices. The interesting part about US now is Trump don't have enough policy levers. Other than his tariff, his physical status is quite weak. So you need the monetary policy of reducing the interest rate. But Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, is not, they are targeting inflation. As long as they see the inflation coming down, they're not going to move. But tariff increase inflation and sustain inflation. So what we're going to see in this global recession is what we call stagflation. Stagflation is when you see inflation and unemployment at the same time. And you will have serious structural issues. On top of whatever we're going to see, we see serious structural issues. So when you have stagflation, you're not going to see V-shaped recovery. You're not going to go down and recover faster because you don't have the export market. It's already imposed the tariff. So what you will have, you'll go and have a U-shape until we recalibrate ourselves. So now everybody is running in to avoid this hard landing, but start to create a soft landing. And this is across globally. It's not just US, China. We also will experience a U-shape. And the U-shape is quite devastating. We do not know how long the bottom will be. In the U-shaped recovery, called the lost decade in Japan, Japan took 10 years. Global financial crisis, European Union took nearly 10 years. Because they have to clean up the balance sheet of all the banks. So that means in this crisis, we'll see a financial crisis occur. All waiting is one more trigger. So where does all this lead us? Sorry. moving forward. Can I move backwards? No, I need to move backwards. It moved too far, fast forward. No, manually. Yeah, you go back. Oh, yeah. Okay, so that brings me back to ASEAN itself. So let me talk a little bit from what the governor has mentioned. So I guess I'll have 15 minutes or so. So now trade itself become very strategic. So this is a new area of study, and this new area of study requires new kind of thinking. So now we have very traditional trade theories that, or growth theory, that we all have been trained, or many of you will be trained. But the new growth theory and a new trade theory is shifting very fast. So fairly, we need to think of the geoeconomics and geopolitics. And geoeconomics is very dynamic. Geo means geography, and the economics of the geography is important for trade. And that's why Krugman won the Nobel Prize for his economic geography. So without understanding the geography, you can't nowadays think about trade itself. But the geoeconomics, the economics of the geography is also dictated by the economics of the politics, the geography of the politics. The way we arrange ourselves is equally important. A dispute island is a good example of geopolitics itself. And under ASEAN, in ASEAN countries, the 10, and one more is going to join us, East Timor, 11 ASEAN members. None of the ASEAN members are democratic countries. In Singapore, you have single party. In Malaysia, you only have two party. In Vietnam, you have communism or socialism. In Laos, you have socialism. My friend he managed the politics. The politics is every country can have its own system, own political system. We will never intervene, non-intervention. That's ASEAN way. That's a geopolitics. But ASEAN, markets all harmonized. If you go to ASEAN, under AFTA, ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, most of goods are going to be already zero. So we have ASEAN, AFTA, ASEAN trade in goods, and AFAS, ASEAN trade in services, and AKIA, ASEAN investment. And yesterday, they released the ASEAN economic framework for 2045. So ASEAN economic agreement, AEC, come into force in 2015. So we are finishing the 2025 blueprint, and we set up another 2 decades of 2045. ASEAN economic community. Single market, but diverse political dimension. Is different from European Union. There's only 2 enduring unions. One is a European Union, institutional convergence. The other one is a trade union and trade integration. Not a trade union, ours is not a customs union. It's an economic cooperation with a legally binding agreement, but diverse political institution. And this is a center called ASEAN centrality. And the ASEAN centrality requires only the ASEAN community coming together, not a single leader. Because it's a shared vision. It's a shared prosperity. Everybody, we all share the prosperity. Under now, we have the third pillar of converging the development component is also important. That's what ASEAN is. So you can't take ASEAN as what it is. So what Trump tariff done is all these ASEAN members come together and reflect back on what we have done and not to take this for granted. Because when you abandon your rule base, no ASEAN member countries can negotiate with larger countries individually. That cannot happen. You don't have any resources. Collectively, we have 670 million people, ASEAN. It's going to be the fourth largest trading area in the world. We have the largest global trading arrangement called RCEP that controls 30% of the GDP, 30% of the investment, and 30% of the trade. We will control, and ASEAN centrality is going to control. I already mentioned, fast trains are going to come in. We're all going to be connected. New cities are going to grow. So this is where the dynamism and Australia put this is ASEAN 21st centrality. Is ASEAN centrality is the 21st. East Asia will be the center for next set of growth. So what Trump trying to do is trying to create another dimension. And this dimension is what we're going to see is a multipolar trading system. So there will be European Union trading, and within the Union you can have the kind of arrangement you have, the European Union. ASEAN, together East Asia will have what the RCEP will consolidate us. And then US will have its own union, if we can have a union. If Canada or Mexico agree what this Trump is doing, but very fragmented. And Africa. So the trade will occur between the multipolar system. It's already emerging. And whether we like it or not trade, but technology will also create a multipolar system. This is a very interesting area of study. Very interesting. Where you bring trade, a market, and still have market-based principles, but in a multipolar system. That means the multipolar will agree the terms of trade and how they're going to trade. There's no way we're going to trade individually with US. US will push us right to the corner. And country like Pacific Island of Papua New Guinea will have more bargaining power than us because they are strategically located in the Pacific, where China and US wants a stakehold. So
it's 5 more minutes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting dynamics we are moving into. Okay. So the importance of geopolitics, geoeconomics is important. I already shared the slides. So I will quickly move. I reduce conflicts, you set up the dispute settlements, you reinforce intellectual property rights, and even allows a proper movement of capital, Mode 3. So all these things are the free trade agreement, legally binding agreement. Okay, so what we have, the geoeconomics has become fragmented. After global financial crisis, we have inequalities rising, even in trade. The rich are getting richer. The skilled are getting more wages, more wage increase than unskilled. The wage gap is rising. The development gap is also widening within a country. The urban centers grow faster than the rural centers. So again, unless we solve some of these issues, this will persist. Trade will still persist. That's why you need to study the AEC. AEC is the other pillar of social harmonized growth is going to be very important to manage this. Okay, so again you can see here the tail end. Anti-globalization is already flattening up. This is before Trump. And you can see this is in terms of the protectionism, and you can see the rising protectionism over the years. And this is even before Trump came in. So Trump actually used this and weaponized this even further for his not self-interest, for his party self-interest. Okay, so you can see in terms of inequality, it's all rising across countries. For example, you take your phone, AI you think is going to equalize growth and equalize wealth? It doesn't. It transfers more purchasing power to the person who controls the technology. It actually increased the income and wealth of those skilled people and people who invest in the technology. Middle income will disappear very fast, called polarization. This is nothing to do with Trump. This is actually happening. So as I said, Trump is just weaponizing this. And you take this and put the geopolitics, and geopolitics is working for him. Unless we solve this, we cannot solve the geopolitics. The geopolitics will intensify. So trade need to account for this fragmented, geo-economic fragmentation itself. Okay, so this one is interesting. In terms of rising inequality, you can see US, China has flattened its inequality, but US inequality has increased. That means within US, the East and the West, their income is rising. The center, the wealth is going down. The inequality within the regional inequality and the middle wealth is stagnating in US. This is not, as I said, Trump just weaponized these people because that center holds a large part of his electoral. Okay. Let me quickly move into my policy discussion, and then I will close. And of course, trade, green economy will play an important role. Okay, policy discussion. One, fairly ASEAN decided to have a collective approach. So yesterday, ASEAN chair under Malaysia, Prime Minister Anwar, he already announced, he already written that ASEAN will discuss collectively with them. But under ASEAN principle, individual countries also can negotiate. So this is the idea. There's three-pronged approach ASEAN is going to approach. One is ASEAN is individually going to negotiate. Why? You want to mitigate the trade diversion. That means when tariff goes up, you're going to have a lot of goods that have to go to the market. I need to mitigate that. So I still need to have a bilateral. Try to reduce the tariff as much as possible. So all ASEAN member countries under ASEAN framework can negotiate. And ASEAN encourage this to mitigate the trade diversion. Second, ASEAN need to invest in future technologies, green and clean and digital economy under DIFA. ASEAN has the digital framework. We need to enforce this very quickly. And it's very enlightening to see a university like this away from Jakarta. And then you have a capital moving to Kalimantan. It will create a lot of growth for. Indonesia will be very, very important for us. As ASEAN develop and consolidate itself, Indonesia have to play an important role because it's the fifth largest population. Will have to play the important role. Why? You have the fast train running from Bandung, Jakarta to Surabaya. Java Island will be highly integrated itself, together with Sumatra. And then we have the other side. So ASEAN and Asia will have to chart its own direction. So the third one is what we call the RCEP, Regional Cooperative Economic Partnership. We have to strengthen it. So there are three elements they have to push. One is RCEP Secretariat. So it's a living agreement. That means every year we will come together and discuss key issues and commitment. That is very, very slow within RCEP. Second, ASEAN already hit the accession clause. Accession means we're going to allow other countries to come in. That's the reason why ASEAN is having a GCC discussion together ASEAN Summit. First time. We invited the Middle East countries to come because of course Malaysia, but fairly we're going to create more market to enter. So Hong Kong has put in the accession to RCEP. Bangladesh, Pakistan also want to join. We want to invite other countries to join. The interesting part about ASEAN or RCEP, it gives differential treatment compared to CPTPP. Differential treatment means I allow developing countries, let developed countries to come in and reform and commit over time. So the interesting part about rule-based trading area is it allows for reform. Reform is important because a lot of things you can't reform. Politically you can't, but with a free trade agreement, with bigger 15 countries, your reform is easier. So you're able to reform, undertake the reform, and move to the frontier better. And countries like that kind of policy dimension. So you align a domestic economy to regional economy is become very important. So RCEP will be very important. The last one of RCEP is push the green and digital economy. So You already can see China is moving into this space very fast because everyone is looking for alternative market. The last point, if I can make, ASEAN trade with US is only 16% to 18%. 85% is based on a rule-based trading area. Rule-based. So I cannot abandon 85% of our rule-based and a coalition-based trade, ASEAN plus one, RCEP, and all the bilaterals I have, for the 15% or 16%. So fairly, ASEAN knew that they have to consolidate and look for that 16% alternative market. The last point is very important. China already announced it will improve its demand consumption. Shift away, because US is a demand consumption, we are the supply producer. So we're going to shape the GVC into more ASEAN focus, and then we're going to change the demand side of the GVC. And not only China is shifting, ASEAN will also shift with the growth in the middle income. Thank you.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you, Professor Sandre, for very interesting insights and presentation. I took note from his discussions first, Trump that weaponized the trade and also the economic system, and also from your presentations, you mentioned about the importance of ASEAN centrality, and I think this is very important if we remember when the day after Trump imposed reciprocal tariff, I remember Vietnam directly negotiated, with the U.S. and also Indonesia as well. And I think, and even in the discussions in Indonesia, it seems to me like Indonesians seem to happy knowing that Vietnam is being imposed higher tariff than Indonesia. I think this is kind of, breaking the ASEAN centrality. I think you highlight the very important thing that we need as Asian countries, as in the region, we need to go together and, not one by one, and then also there's improving the region's trade. So that's some insights from Professor Sandre. We know that there are questions, but before I open for the questions, I would like to invite our second speaker, Professor Sahara, and let me briefly read Professor Sahara bio. Professor Sahara from IPB University, a distinguished economist whose research focuses on agriculture economics, development economics, and policy analysis. Professor Sahara's expertise in commodity markets and agricultural trade, I believe, is very valuable, particularly when we consider how important our agriculture products on the export market, and also how Trump's policy might affect our agriculture sector. On the teaching activities, is Professor of Economics at IPB University and Adjunct Associate Professor at Adelaide University, Australia. And other activities, he also serves as Director of International Trade Analysis and Policy Studies at IPB University. She is also Deputy President of Southeast Asia International Trade and Finance Associations. And she's received multiple awards from IPB University and Adelaide. She holds a PhD in economics from Adelaide University. I guess Professor Sahara, time is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Pak Yudo. Thank you for the nice introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. While Professor Sandre focused on the impact of Trump policies on the East ASEAN regions, my presentation will much more focus on, can you help on my slide? Oh yeah. Maybe I need some help for the next slide. My presentation will much more focus on the potential impacts of Trump's reciprocal tariffs on agri-food sectors in Indonesia. Why food sectors? You know that Indonesia has a large number of population, more than 280 million people. In such situation, a stable and sufficient food supply is important for Indonesia in order to ensure the food security in Indonesia. And then, the food and agriculture sector plays an important role in Indonesia by supporting livelihood, absorbing labor, and also contributing to export. So that's why the topic of my presentation today is related to the current situation of agri-food policy programs and also the potential impact of Trump reciprocal tariffs on agri-food sectors in Indonesia. Next, please. Yeah, next. I think Pak Yudo has already introduced me, so I don't need the slide. And then let me start my presentation with the introduction. Next, please. Next. Okay, as you can see here, this is definitely not my picture. This slide actually shows the picture of the Indonesian president from 1945 until now. And from this slide, we can see that staple food has been the major concern for Indonesia, as indicated by various programs implemented by the Indonesian president at the time that much more focused on the special effort to meet the food security program, particularly the rice self-sufficiency. And you know that since October 2024, Indonesia has had a new president, Mr. Prabowo Subianto, and besides focus on the rice self-sufficiency, our new president also focused on promoting downstream processing industry programs and also school meals programs. And then we will talk about the program later. Next slide, please. This slide shows the roles of agriculture sector to the Indonesian GDP, employment, and also its productivity. And from the figures, we can see that the agriculture sector grew by about 3% in the period 1982 until 2023. And then in 1982, we can see here that agriculture sector contribute to about 25% to the Indonesian GDP, and then the share reduced significantly to only 12% in 2023. And also the agriculture sectors in Indonesia has a significant contribution to the labor absorption. As we can see here, in 1987, the agriculture sector employed more than 55% of the total workforce in Indonesia. And then in 2023, this share has declined by about 28%. And then from this figure, we can see that the economic transformation is observable in Indonesia, as indicated by the reduction share of the agriculture sector to the Indonesian GDP and also to the labor absorption. And then talking about the productivity, I mean the agriculture productivity, as we can see from the figures, the agriculture sector productivity increased by 2.8% per year from 1987 until 2023, but stagnated during the last 5 years. Next, please. And then our president has recently launched a national transformation strategy toward a golden Indonesia 2045 that operationalized through 8 national priority programs. We know it as Asta Cita. And then a key target under this strategy is to achieve an average economic growth by 8%, which is essential for the job creation and also to support the structural transformation. And the agriculture sector plays an important role in this transformation. And as part of the Asta Cita, President Prabowo has launched 3 main programs in agri-food sector, including rice self-sufficiency programs, agriculture downstreaming programs, or we know as hilirisasi program, And then the third is nutritious school meal programs. We know it as the makan bergizi gratis. Yeah. And then talking about, next slide, talking about the first flagship programs, which is rice self-sufficiency. Next, please. As we can see here that for the rice, yeah, like many other ASEAN countries, rice is an important staple food in Indonesia. With the per capita consumption about 79 kg in 2024, and the number of population more than 280 million people, Indonesia experienced deficit in rice consumption and production in 2024. Our deficit was about 0.56 million tons. And in order to fulfill the gap between the production and consumption, Indonesia, of course, need to import the rice. But because rice is an important staple food in Indonesia, the Indonesian government must maintain reserves equivalent to 10 until 15% of the total consumption. So, as you can see from this figure that in 2024, Indonesia imported rice for more than 4.5 million tons. And in order to reduce our dependency on the imported rice, it is important for Indonesia to increase rice production. However, as we can see here, one of the main challenges to increase the rice production in Indonesia is the low level of total factor productivity in rice sector, which was only about 1.47% during the period 1982 until 2020. You know that TFV is the source of output growth, I mean the rice growth from the technology aspect. And another challenge is that there was a productivity disparities among the islands in Indonesia. From the table, we can see that Kalimantan Island and Maluku and Papua Islands has the productivity below 4 tons per hectare for the rice. And then the two main questions remains related to these programs. The first is how much the cost for the extensification and then intensification programs. Of course, the Indonesian government need a lot of budget to support the rice self-sufficiency programs. And then the second question is how sustainable is it? Next, please. The second flagship program of President Prabowo is agriculture downstreaming industry program. This program actually is dedicated to increase the value added of agriculture commodity, increase the labor absorptions, and also as the re-industrialization strategy. And then the geographical focus of agriculture downstreaming in Indonesia is diverse based on the supply side factors. But currently, the Indonesian government must much more focus on the commodities of palm oil, coconut, cacao, coffee, and also seaweed. And then the table show the value added of palm oil commodity and its derived product. And from this table, we can see that rather than export CPO to other countries directly, it would be better if Indonesia can produce edible oil, margarine, surfactant products from palm oil, that have higher value added. And then, again, similar to the first program, the main question remains related to these programs. The question are, what are the required investments, who should be involved, and how can we make it happen? Next, please. The third program is the nutritious school meals program. And this program is dedicated to improve nutrition among school children. And we know that stunting prevalence is quite high in Indonesia, about 19%. And the target of the Indonesian government related to the stunting prevalence, about 14%. So we still have a big homework on how to reduce the stunting prevalence in Indonesia. And the second objective of this program is to provide new market alternatives for agriculture products. So previously we know that the value chain of agriculture products is quite long, involving a lot of intermediaries. By performing these programs, the government of Indonesia hope that the agri-food value chain can be sorted, only involve several intermediaries. And then several challenges also occurs in these programs. The first is how to consider cultural aspect and children's preference along with food safety and quality. We know that there are several cases related to food poisoning that occur in several schools. And then these programs need a large amount of funding, of course, and then many people also concerned that this program will increase the import of agri-food sector in Indonesia that can lead the trade deficit in agri-food sector. And then, of course, these programs need consistency and persistency. And then, next slide, please. Now I will talk a little bit about the consumption side, since the consumption patterns has changed significantly in Indonesia. And then from this figure, we can see that cereals, in this case rice, make up a substantial portion of Indonesian total food consumption. However, as you can see at the bottom, the blue one, the share of cereal consumption tend to reduce, while the share of high value agricultural products like fish, meat, vegetable, and also fruits tend to increase. It seems that Indonesia follow, the trend in Indonesia, follow Bennett's law, stating that as household income increase, the proportion of budget spent on staple food like cereal and rice will decrease, while the proportion spent on high value agricultural foods such as fish, vegetable, fruit, and meat will increase. And then, next slide. Indonesia is also at positive transformation on food consumption. Consumption in Indonesia has shifted to more good quality food, but we know that the price of good quality food is quite expensive in Indonesia. And then, what is the main lesson from the consumption pattern in Indonesia? As I mentioned previously, that it is projected that the consumption of high value agricultural products in Indonesia will significantly increase. And if Indonesia cannot fulfill the increased demand, particularly from the high middle income class consumers, import of high value agriculture products will increase, leading to trade deficit in food sector. And you know, in Indonesia, there are about 25 million people can be categorized as the high middle income class. So, in such situation, it is important for the Indonesian government for not only focus on the staple food, which is rice, but also it is important to increase the production of high value agriculture products like fruits, vegetable, meat, and also fish and other consumer protein. And then I will talk about the potential impact of Trump reciprocal tariffs on agri-food sector in Indonesia. Next, please. The three flagship programs of President Prabowo that have already mentioned cannot be separated from the global dynamic, including the reciprocal tariffs imposed by the United States. For instance, downstream industrialization effort could be hindered by a slowdown in export performance, and also the school meal programs in Indonesia still depend on a large amount of import of agri-food products, particularly from the US. So the reciprocal tariffs, of course, will provide significant implication to the Indonesian food situation. Next, please. And then, as you can see here, that Indonesia has an active role in international trade of food products, and also Indonesia also imports a large volume of chemical fertilizer that is important to support agriculture products. Next, the right side table show the agriculture, the top 10 agriculture export and import in 2024. From this table, we can see that Indonesia actually, we are happy that we have maintained our agricultural trade surplus since 2019. In 2024, the highest export was contributed by CPO, fish products, coffee, cacao, tea, and also tobacco. While the highest imports were cereals, in this case wheat, sugar, oilseed, and also dairy products. And then, as we can see here, that the top destination export in 2024, including China, India, United States, Pakistan, and also Malaysia. While the top sources of import countries, including Brazil, China, Australia, United States, and India. From this figure, we can see that United States and China are important trading partners for Indonesia. And next, there's two figures, so the top 10 Indonesian export to US, and then the top 10 Indonesia import from US. And from the left side figure, we can see that the main agri-food products export to US from Indonesia include palm oil and its derived products, and also fish products. And then the main agri-food imported from US includes soybean, dairy products, and also wheat. And then next slide, please. We in ITAPS stand for International Trade Analysis and Policy Studies. We in ITAPS try to quantify the impact of Trump's reciprocal tariffs on the Indonesian economy and agricultural trade by using Global Trade Analysis Project model, or we know it as GTAP model. Basically, GTAP is a computable general equilibrium model, consists of many countries. In our GTAP model, the country aggregation represent countries affected by the US reciprocal tariffs, comprising 55 regions and also 48 sectors. And the data, we update the data, in order to represent the current condition related to the most favored nation tariffs, and also the advalorant equivalent non-tariff measures, or NTMs. And also we updating the total factor productivities, particularly for the agriculture sector, manufacture sector, and also services. And then there are 3 simulation scenarios performed in our analysis. Next, simulation 1. Next slide. Next slide. The simulation 1 represent the reciprocal tariffs to China imposed by US by the amount 125%, and other country by following the baseline of 10%, except for electronics product. And then the simulation 2 represent the reciprocal tariff to China 125%, and other countries as announced by the Trump at the early this April 2025. And we know that Indonesia was imposed by Trump the reciprocal tariff 32%. And then simulation 3, actually the combination of simulation 2 plus retaliatory action from the China and also the Canada. And then by using the GTAP model, we know that next. Yeah, our our simulation showed that in all simulation, the reciprocal tariffs will decline trade in food and agriculture commodities, particularly for wood products, meat products, pepper, leather, milk, sugar, fishery, wheat, rice, and also other cereals. And the reciprocal tariff will increase the price of energy and also food commodities, which are relatively widely imported by Indonesia, including petroleum, sugar, wheat, corn, and also soybean. Next, from a macroeconomic standpoint, Trump's policy is expected to lead stagnation in Indonesia economic growth by about 5%. We know that the target of Indonesia this year related to the economic growth is 5.30%. And the slowdown in Indonesian economic growth particularly caused by a decline in export. From the stable, we know that the Indonesian export will reduce with the ranking from 178% under the simulation 1 until about 5% in the simulation 3. And then the reciprocal tariffs will also decrease the household consumption in Indonesia by about 0.36% until 0.2%. And the inflation will occur in Indonesia when there is a retaliation scenario in simulation 2, in simulation 3 due to the increasing prices for imported products, particularly soybean, maize, and also wheat products. And then next question, which sectors are the winners and losers when the reciprocal tariffs imposed by Trump? Next, please. Next. Yeah, as we can see here that the comparison across simulation, I mean simulation 1 and 2, show consistent results. Sectors that show an increase in export include footwear and petroleum, while textile and textile products, computer and electronic equipment show a decline in export to US. And then the potential decline in export, next. The potential decline in export to the US is increasing due to retaliation which further exacerbated the uncertainty. And then next, this is the impact of Trump reciprocal tariffs on the Indonesian food and agriculture export to the US. As we can see here that vegetable oil and fats, food products, crops, vegetable, fruits, nuts, and fishery products will experience export contraction. And the decrease in Indonesia's food and agriculture export to United States is estimated at the rank $400 million under the simulation 1 until about $3,000 billion under the simulation 3. And then this phenomenon occurs due to high market concentration of the Indonesian product in the US. Next, please. This slide shows the Indonesian import from China under the simulation 1 and 2. And as you can see here, that the majority of sector experience rising import from China, specifically for machinery and tools, chemical products, metal products, rubber, fruits, vegetable, and also food products. Next. And then under the simulation 3, trade retaliation will still rise Indonesian import from China. And the most impacted sector are still consistent, including machinery and tools, chemical products, metal products, rubber, fruits and vegetables, and also fruits products. Next. Okay. Now I'm coming up to the conclusion and implication. We know that the disruption can come from anywhere, including the reciprocal tariffs imposed by President Trump. And the disruption, of course, will impact on the flagship programs proposed by or promoting by President Prabowo. Hilirisasi, and then makan bergizi gratis, and also rice self-sufficiency programs. And then it is important to increase agriculture productivity through innovation. But innovation, of course, needs sufficient funding, particularly on the research and development activities. And then, while boosting production on staple food commodity, it is also important to increase the production of high-value agricultural products because the shift in the consumption pattern change significantly in Indonesia. And then Indonesia should also diversify its export destination countries and sources of imports. And then it is also important to accelerating and optimizing of implementation trade agreements. We have RCEPs and then ASEAN +1, +2 and etc. And also we have ICMWEB and etc. So it is important to optimize the implementation of these trade agreements. I think that's all, Pak Yudo, related to my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Sahara, for very informative presentations. I took note here that self-sufficiency program, particularly on rice, has been at the central policy. It's political controversial, it's political sensitive, but it's central to every president. And Professor Sahara also mentioned about the importance of the US as for Indonesia export market, but also imports. So I quite surprised that we import the first, I think, soybeans. So your favorite tempe is actually imported product from the US. So yeah, and gorengan as well. And also, it is interesting to see the simulations that Professor Sahara has conducted. We learned that electronics is one of key exports for Indonesia. So it's important the fact that Trump's policy might hurt this industry. So there are a lot of things, and I believe there are a lot of questions from you, but keep it for a while, and let's hear from our final, last but not least, speakers, Professor Nias Asdullah. Let me briefly read his vitae. Professor Nias Asdullah currently holds multiple distinguished positions, including Senior Fellow at the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs, or IDEAS, in Malaysia. He is also visiting professor of economics at the University of Reading, United Kingdom, adjunct professor at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand, and on the government position, Professor Asadullah served in advisory positions with the government of Malaysia, and also did some consultancy assignments with international organizations like World Bank, WHO, UNESCO, and also UNESCO. On OIC countries, he is also writing the Global Assessment of Education Quality in Islamic countries. Last night he shared with me, and we will share his books. So Professor Nias holds PhD in economics from Oxford University, and he's doing a lot of research, and he has many publications as well. So Professor Nias, time is yours.
Thank you for your kind introduction. So by now, you have heard about the implication of Trump tariff policy for Indonesia. You've also heard from my co-panelists on what all these mean for ASEAN countries. This final lecture in this panel is going to take you around the world with a focus on Muslim countries. So we are going from local to regional to global. And I've been asked to reflect broadly on what the potential impact of Trump's policies will be on developing countries and Muslim countries in particular. But as you know, most of the Muslim countries are developing countries, so I'm going to focus really on that. All right. Right, so quick introduction so that you know what to expect from this lecture. By now you know that well, we are dealing with someone we have seen before. So this is Donald Trump 2.0. But of course, this time we have greater worries. We are worried about the specter of deglobalization. Professor Sandra talked about it. So new protectionism. And this has caused anxieties in the global south, including Muslim countries. Anxieties relating to reversal of gains all these countries have made through trade, through exports, at a time of globalization, when countries were trading more among each other. There was more goods and services crossing borders in terms of imports, in terms of exports. But now, with this deglobalization, we are worrying about premature deindustrialization in countries within the Muslim world, within the developing world, that are trying to move away from export of commodities, agricultural products, to becoming manufacturing giants. And it is also coinciding with other anxieties, social anxieties, anxieties of rising inequality that Professor Sandra talked about. And at the same time, there are countries that are trying to move away from least developing country status to developed country status, and there are risk of delayed graduation. But my lecture will point out that there is no one Muslim country. The Muslim world varies in terms of countries. There are different stages of economic development. They have different endowments. Some are rich in oil, others are natural resources poor. Some are stories of growth miracles, growth surprises, others are stories of growth disasters. And this is the legacy before this recent talk about tariff, right? So therefore, when I lecture on the potential impact on the Muslim world, we have to keep in mind this heterogeneity, that the Muslim world, there is enormous diversity, there is enormous difference. Some are strong economies, some are weak economies, so the implication will be different. And also because the tariff shock, the quantity, is also different. Don't ask me, ask Donald Trump. So we'll look at it, that why different Muslim countries face different tariff rates. I mean, what is the economics, or is it the politics? And I'll end the lecture with a reflection on challenges. I say challenges because Muslim countries, we talk about Ummah, but when it comes to economic cooperation, it is not enough. It's a OIC, or Organization of Islamic Countries, is a fragile economic coalition. And I will end the lecture with the emphasis that the best way to respond to Donald Trump is to actually cooperate more. Muslim countries should cooperate more, and how, I'll comment on that. So, on that note, here is the outline of my lecture. I've organized my lecture in 3 blocks, in case you get lost. So I'll take you in steps. In the first block, I will try to explain to you how different countries within the Muslim world are looking at Donald Trump, and how Donald Trump is looking at them, right? So with that background, I'll also tell you how Muslim countries differ. There are as many as 57 countries, but they belong to different geographies. That means they have different trade patterns, different endowments. And with that out of the picture, I'll also comment on implications for the developing world. I'll come back to recapping what we have already heard from the previous 2 speakers, which is the second part, the nature of tariff shocks, and what does the future of world economic look like. So I'll be building on what my 2 co-panelists have mentioned. And there I'll draw a distinction between short-term challenges and long-term challenges, as well as opportunities. Every crisis is an opportunity, something I'll point out, and I'll then move to 2 case studies, 1 country case study and 1 regional case study of countries within the Muslim world. And then is the conclusion. All right, so first thing first, tariff and Muslim economies. Can anyone tell me collectively how large is the Muslim economy if we were to add up GDPs of all Muslim countries? Any ideas, students? Anyone? Yes? In terms of US dollar, how many trillions are we talking about? Roughly. Okay, so Fun fact, it's 18 trillion in 2016. Today, it's close to 20 trillion. If you want to put that in perspective, it's bigger than the GDP of China. Right? So China is 18 trillion. So we have enough power only if we stand together. Right? But we are not together, that's a different story. So the good news, therefore, is that OIC or Muslim countries together, we have significant economic muscle. Population-wise, we are also very big. And so what is the challenge? The challenge is that we trade a lot with the United States. More than how much we trade with each other. So the intra-OIC trade is less than the combined trade between OIC and the United States. Well, it's good. We are aspirational. We want to trade with superpowers, but it also makes us vulnerable in times of geopolitics, such as this. So even though, in a context that within intertrade among big Muslim countries have increased over time, but it's not been enough. Okay, so that's something I want you to keep in mind. With that, let's now move to the next point, which is, where does Muslim countries stand when it comes to Donald Trump's obsession with tariffs, slapping tariffs on countries around the world? So first thing first, just a quick reminder that when we talk about Muslim countries, they are spread across continents. So here in Southeast Asia, we have about 8 countries, and then there are other 5, 6 in Central Asia, then there are a lot many in Africa, Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, North America, and Middle East combined. What it tells you, therefore, is that Muslim countries, you've got a lot of them in the poorer part of the developing world. And then, of course, you have very rich Muslim countries, Gulf Cooperation Council, Saudi Arabia, United Kingdom, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman. They have one thing in common, a lot of oil, so they don't have to manufacture much. So what does it mean? Well, the pattern of trade with the US is very, very different, right? So they're not exporting manufactured goods to the US, but they're importing a lot. Nonetheless, when you look into ongoing US tariff-related investigation, the funny part is that in this list of countries, there is only one Muslim country, Turkey. So what it means is that when you look at the pattern of tariff across countries, Muslim countries are not in a big disadvantage. In general, non-Muslim countries are facing much higher tariff rate. Professor Sanvir talked about Cambodia, Vietnam, much, much higher. On that note, let's have a look. So what I did is to compile the data on tariff for Muslim countries in blocks in the next slide. And what I've done here is also to put in the tariff that the US accuses these countries of imposing on US exports to these countries. So you see 2 bars here. So the blue bar is what, the US is accusing of a country, the tariff that the country is imposing on its good, and then the red bar is what our 2 previous speakers talked about, the reciprocal tariff. So if you're trying to find a pattern, well, don't try too hard. Why? So look at 2 countries, Iran and Syria. These 2 countries are under trade sanction. That means they can export very little to the US. So there is very little logic in arguing that, Syria has put 80% tariff on US goods. And also in case of Iran, but yet you can find that in case of Iran, it's a flat reciprocal tariff of 10%. In case of Syria, it is as high as 40%. So what it means is that although Donald Trump uses some kind of formula, when you try to reason, there isn't much reason. There's only one reason, that's politics. All the Gulf cooperation countries, oil rich, they have been presented with flat 10% tariff. They are not experiencing any add-on tariffs. Again, the Central Asian countries, except Kazakhstan, very friendly tariff rate. Who is facing the music? Unfortunately, the oil-poor developing countries. Indonesia, you've heard, Malaysia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, they're facing high tariff. Interestingly, this is the bottom block where you have the manufacturing giants within the Muslim world. So 4 countries within the Muslim world that are trying to be exporter, particularly Malaysia is the leader. These are countries that are facing higher tariff compared to others. And that has great implication because these countries are also role model for countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are trying to become exporter of manufacturing goods. Now, so that's something I'm going to focus on in the rest of my lecture. So here, therefore, I've singled them out, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, along with a few other countries. So when you think of the economic implication, again, previous speakers have mentioned this. So the one thing everyone agrees on, that there will be broad economic impact on these countries that are relying on exports, that are pursuing trade as engine of economic growth. So less trade because of tariff, less export means there is less growth prospect. But then the second thing is there will be an attempt for trade diversion to benefit from it. The fact that China is being slapped with higher tariff, Vietnam that competes with Bangladesh in ready-made garments is being slapped with higher tariff, so Bangladesh can also take advantage of that. In terms of policy response, one is, well, what can you do in terms of your domestic policy, fiscal policy? So tariff rate, that's exogenous for you, you can't control, but then what can you do in terms of improving your productivity is something you can. And then the fourth aspect is regional cooperation. Another thing you can do is pursue free trade agreement, bilateral agreement, and also think of other multilateral responses. So that's something I want you to keep in mind. All right, so but again, in my later part of the lecture, I'll get into country case studies, and the countries that I will particularly focus on belongs to this list of 4 countries. And here what I want to point out is that these are 4 Muslim economies, Muslim majority economies that have done well in terms of breaking away from an exporter of agricultural goods to becoming economies that are export driven. The best example within the whole Muslim world as we speak is Malaysia, a country that has made a great fortune by exporting semiconductors, chips, electronics, and electrical goods. And they now face a hefty tariff rate of 24%. Indonesia is a mixed story. It has a bit of electronics, and then at the same time, it relies on commodity exports. And then comes Pakistan, and then lastly, Bangladesh. What you may not know is that Bangladesh is the largest within the entire Muslim world in terms of export of ready-made garments. And it is the second largest in the world after China. So therefore, I'm going to dedicate a case study on Bangladesh to understand what should be the policy response within the Muslim world for a country that has made it big in terms of export of manufacturing goods. And this is also an example for other countries, particularly from Africa, that are trying to replicate the Bangladesh model, moving away from agriculture and having gone into export of manufacturing goods. All right, so now before I move to the second part of my lecture, I should point out that we have seen such crises before, but in a very different context. The 2007-8 financial crisis. But that was a crisis because of choices within the system. So we had recession at the time, but this time the recession is a manufactured recession. It's not the cause of capitalism, but it's one that is led by one country single-handedly, its policy choice. But there is another reason why this time the recession is different, because it had pre-trends. Even before Donald Trump policy shock, there were 3 things that was shaping the world trade pattern, including the extent to which we trade and how we trade. So the first one is restrictions on trade during the pandemic. And during that time, you can see that from the graph on the right-hand side, that between 2018 and 2020, the restrictions on trade has gone up, and it has shoot up in 2022. So that pattern of deglobalization was there even before Donald Trump came into power. Our first speaker pointed that out. The second part is the growth deceleration as a consequence of that. And here the interesting point is that in 21st century, the emerging middle and developing economies grew faster than developed countries combined. But now, of course, even in the second group, there has been evidence of growth slowdown. And the way to respond to this, the consensus view, is to tackle productivity growth. That this country is the only way to continue or reverse this pattern of growth deceleration is to invest in domestic infrastructure to improve productivity of labor and capital. And the third challenge is inequality boomerang. After decades of decline in inequality following pandemic, we have seen a resurgence in inequality. So these three patterns would add to the recent challenge caused by Donald Trump. And it is in this context that developing countries, Muslim countries, should think of the policy response. How do we overcome this? Okay, so with that, I have finished the first part of the lecture. I've told you the diversity in tariff rates that we face within the developing world. I've told you how the Muslim world, the developing world is different. There's huge differences. So they face differential tariff. They also have different backgrounds. They have different economic history, different profile of exports, manufacturing. And at the same time, there is a global context to this. So that's something you need to keep in mind when I come to the third part of my lecture, where I reflect on the policy choice. But now what I want to do is to recap, what does this Donald Trump madness mean for the world economy today and tomorrow? And then I'll come back to case studies. So it all started on 2nd of April. Today is 27th of May. A lot has happened. So on 27th of May, we are on midpoint of the 90 days pause, right? So 2nd of April, you know what happened, the declaration, and then, you know, on 9th of April, within a week, came a bit of a good news that, there is a pause, except China and all that. So what it has done is to create a window of opportunity for developing countries to rethink, re-strategize, renegotiate. At the same time, they're taking short-term choices, short-term policy measures to benefit from this window of opportunity. So therefore, when the 90 days pause ends, they can then decide what to do after that. So therefore, in this lecture, I'll comment on what countries should be doing now in the remaining couple of weeks. And then, of course, after that, when Donald Trump announces his new policy. All right, so the first thing first, what Professor Southwell pointed out that, well, the recession is evident, it is true. IMF considered various scenarios reflecting on the global cost of trade fragmentation, the fact that US and China is decoupling. Under various scenarios, they have various estimates. They all point out that, yes, it is going to be significant loss, no matter how you calculate. I'm not going to bore you with the detail. So given that, the second stylus fact is that this time, this is causing great anxiety in the capital market, financial market. So what does it mean? Well, we have seen stock markets fall. Why do they fall? They fall in expectation of future changes. And what are they expecting? They're expecting the recession to continue. They're expecting future losses. And this is, therefore, extra bad news for the world economy. Okay. So what it means, therefore, is that what is going to happen within the US economy is also becoming uncertain. as well as what is going to happen outside. Therefore, there is concern over stagflation that reduces fiscal space everywhere for policymakers to intervene. And what it also means is that there will be implications for interest rates central banks can charge all around the world, and so on and so forth. So what it therefore means is that we'll not just recession, we are also entering into a period of policy uncertainty. So if you're a policymaker, be it Indonesia and elsewhere, how should you respond? Two things come to mind. One is, what should I do today? Remember that we are still within the 90 days pause, so I should decide about immediate policy choice, and then I should decide about what I should do after 90 days. One thing that everyone is doing is to rush to export to the US to beat the tariff, right? So we all anticipate that something even worse might happen after the 90 days pause, so therefore there is a rush to exports to the US. There is also a rush for migrant workers in different countries to send money back. So these two patterns are actually helping developing countries in the short term. So therefore, for the time being, a country should not make any abrupt decision so far as short-term concerns are concerned. But what they should be certainly thinking of is the long term, right? And to appreciate this point, one way to think through is to reflect on how recessions have impacted Muslim countries in the past. So I'll actually explain that in the next part of my talk, where I'll reflect on what happened to Bangladesh economy during the 2007-8 recession, so that you can understand how economies adjust during short term, given a shock, and then the long term. And with that, you can then also appreciate the difference in policy choice, short term and long term. Okay, so on that note, so now that you also know the nature of the shock, its implication for the world economy, the inevitability of a recession, stagflation and all that, let me now move to the last part of my lecture, where I will reflect on one country study, Bangladesh, and then I'll focus on one regional case study, focusing on the situation of D8, or the 8 largest Muslim countries. All right, so first thing first, Bangladesh. Why Bangladesh? As I've said, that it is the biggest exporter of ready-made garments within the entire Muslim world. After China, it is ranked number 2 in the world. And what is now the story is that Bangladesh's trade value, be it export and import, as you can see, Bangladesh does not import much from the US. It exports a lot, North America. That's why there is trade surplus from Bangladesh's side, and that's why Bangladesh has been presented with a hefty tariff. But what is also interesting is that Bangladesh trades a lot with Europe. They have a similar trade surplus with Europe. Europe is not worried about that. At the same time, Bangladesh has also export pattern with the rest of Asia, although it imports more, and that's the China story. So Bangladesh economy is built on 2 R's. One is export of ready-made garments, another one is remittance. So therefore, what we are seeing now is a rush to export to the US market to take advantage of the 90 days pause. But beyond that, the long-term challenge is to move away from ready-made garments, to diversify. Semiconductor is one. And the second challenge is to build human capital, so that the country moved from export of unskilled migrant workers to that of skilled migrant workers. So the question here is this. Those policies take long time. Skilling up your migrant workers take long time. Changing your export portfolio from ready-made garments to semiconductors take long time. What should the country do in the short term, now, in the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks? Here, the experience of 2007-8 financial crisis is very interesting. So what we have found is that, so the country managed to weather that shock quite well. Here on the left-hand side, you can find the pattern of exports from Bangladesh, ready-made garments and non-RMG garments. So you can find that, well, there was a dip between December 2007 and December 2008, but then it bounced back. Again, when we look at Bangladesh's export by, so a country, so again what we find is that, well, so it has found a way to shift from the traditional export destination to a new one, Japan. So what it points out is that, well, so it is possible to diversify without changing your export portfolio for a given export commodity to cope with external shock in a time of recession. So that's a positive for Bangladesh. The second pattern is relating to the second source of revenue for the country, which is foreign remittance from migrant workers. And again, what we find is that on the right-hand side, between 2007 and 2008, immediately during the recession, there's a spike in remittance. So the remittance number of workers goes up between 2007 and 2008, and then it slows down. So therefore, when it comes to short-term response, the government doesn't need to do something rash, going by past pattern. But of course, given that this is a shock that faces all Muslim countries, they also need to think long-term. And so this one I'll skip, this on inflation. So that's something I'm going to focus on. So therefore, policy response is that when it comes to short-term, we should not panic, going by past history. But when it comes to long-term reform, we don't know what we don't know. So there is a lot of uncertainty, unknowns. Therefore, the priority should be no regrets policy. Policies that are about improving labor productivity and so on. But in the short term, one thing that can be done, which is more engagement with the foreign trade partners, more trade and investment treaties, agreements, bilateral as well as multilateral, and at the same time making the legal framework for investment in the country foreign investor friendly. Now is the last case study of my lecture. Here I want to turn to the story of D8. For those of you who are not aware, D8 is the coalition of 8 largest Muslim economies in the world. We have, beyond Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey. And as you can see that, their economies are very large, not just in terms of population, but also in terms of economy. So why am I doing this? It is to point out that the coalition within the Muslim world in terms of economic collaboration has been very poor. So much so that 8 countries got frustrated. These are all, by the way, non-Arab countries. Non-Arab countries that got frustrated and they formed a coalition which is already 25 years old. Unfortunately, even with that, not much has been achieved. So these 8 countries together has a combined GDP of 4 trillion, which is actually bigger than that of India, and that is actually 25% of the entire OIC GDP. So what is the problem? The problem is that in the last 25 years, they were meant to trade more, and we have not seen much progress. So this is data from one of my papers, where I've also presented contrast between intra-DA trade and then trade with China and India. So here's the graph. What you find is that in 1997, intra-DA trade was dominating trade between D8 and China and India. By 2017, it got worse. China became the biggest for these countries in terms of trade partner, even compared to intra-DA trade. So given this legacy, what it means is that moving forward, if we are to respond to this Donald Trump tariff shock, instead of looking at it as a crisis, we should look at it as an opportunity. Opportunity to invest more vigorously in our own citizens, in their labor productivity, in the efficiency of our ports, institutions, bureaucracy, so that our domestic productivity, total factor productivity goes up, so that then collectively the 8 countries or OIC countries together can create a mechanism so that they can deal with global bullies like Donald Trump by cooperating more. So I'm just flashing 2 books that are my own work. One is the first global study on education quality in Muslim world, where I've explained in detail the human capital challenge, and the next one is on Economies. Sorry for shameless self-advertisement, but on that note, let me now conclude. So the conclusion is that as I'm giving this lecture, we are in the midpoint of a 90 days global tariff pause. We don't know what's going to happen after 90 days. So we have about 4 or 5 weeks left. So we are dealing with unknowns and uncertainties. One takeaway from my lecture, as I want to place it, is that instead of worrying so much about trade policy uncertainty, it is time to focus on domestic policy. It's time to hold our government accountable for what they're doing. It's time to hold our leaders within the Muslim world accountable for how much cooperation they are facilitating. How many students are moving borders within the Muslim world, moving from low education countries to high education countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, from Africa, and again, how much FDI is moving from Middle East, Arab countries into countries within Southeast Asia, Muslim countries that are aspiring to become exporter of manufactured goods. That is, I think, going to be the focus, and that should be the focus, particularly if the global recovery takes time in response to the recession. So in that context, structural reforms within the Muslim world domestically should be a priority along the line of political stability. We certainly don't want Donald Trump in our own respective countries. On that note, I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nias, for very interesting presentations. So here I took note that Trump policies have created anxieties across the Muslim world, and of course, when we talk about the Muslim world, it's very diverse. And even you say that OIC is like a fragile economic coalition, yeah. And we learned also that even Trump tariff is very different across different Muslim worlds. I thought that your chart on the Gulf country is something wrong, but it turns out that Trump imposed the same tariff for Gulf countries, but different tariff for other Muslim countries. So I guess it's very interesting to see. And of course, Trump's behavior in recent months is quite erratic. Even now, like the US still negotiating tariff with the EU, it's not end yet. And of course, it will create uncertainties. And we don't know after 90 days, yeah, whether he will extend another 90 days and another 19 days. So that's what happens these days is very highly uncertain. So let me open questions and answer session. I would like to start with 3 questions to begin with. So let's, one lady in this. Okay. Tell your name and your questions.
Yes.
Please be brief, yeah.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity that you've given to me. So I would like to say that today I got a lot of knowledge. I can expand my mindset, specifically talk about Trump's tariff policy. So I will deliver my question for the first speaker. We talk.
Your name?
Oh, sorry. My name is Sri Ulfa. I'm from Gajah Mada, Universitas Gajah Mada. So I will deliver my question for the first speaker. Before we talk about ASEAN country, so my question is, with high and different tariff for each ASEAN country, how can ASEAN stay united and keep its central role, especially when each country depends on different sector of trade, like electronic for Malaysia and Vietnam, and for Indonesia, focus on textile. So uh, how about the, yeah, I mean that how they can stay in united and keep its central role. And the second question for the second speaker, that before we explore about Indonesian agriculture sector, so I will deliver my question about, based on export-import data, as we presented before, is Indonesia in high risk position in the face of Trump's unilateral tariff policies, or does the country have a stronger bargaining position for bilateral trade negotiation? That's all my question. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Silva. Let's collect another questions. Yes, the guy with red shirt. Can anybody help giving mix?
Thank you very much. My name is Fandi. I'm student here. Actually, I am interested in protectionism issue, and I want to ask regarding about this one. First is about the geoeconomic influence, geopolitics. But along history, we have not say, maybe my question will be something like this, Pak. If we see this traditional tariff barriers that enacted by Trump is potential problem, my question will be, why we never ask Pak Sudrajat problem, something like non-tariff barriers, something like environment and social provisions that installed by the EU and the US before this tariff issue rising, because it relates to the developing countries' development. Why we don't condemn such non-tariff barriers? Because it has also become the barriers, because become the protectionist policies for developing countries to enter into the luxury developed countries market. And the second is about, this is also my interest is about what is different between protectionism and nationalism's policy in economics. Because I do think that Professor Sarah just knows, talk morely about nationalism in terms of nationalism, but in economic landscape, it's like general protectionism, because it's Indonesia intention to protect nickel from the international market, but at the same time, Indonesia intended, oh yeah, this is our intention to edit values for the nickel. So what is different? Why we condemn protectionism, and do we also condemn nationalism's economic policies? Maybe that's one. Thank you.
Thank you. Another one, I guess, last one.
Thank you so much, moderator Pak Yudo. My name is Ananta Hagabean. Actually, I'm a PhD student for economic in this university. Actually, I have a question for the whole speakers. I'm sorry, I just collected from the first time I stood here. Actually, my first question to Prof. Nias, because it's really still new. As you mentioned in your presentation that I think we can say that most of the Muslim countries has no impact with this tariff from the Trump. But of course there is several impact, but the Gulf countries no effect for this tariff. Actually, and also based on the data also from the global data, there's Muslim country has like 12 to 15% from the total trade to USA. Do you think actually there's a possibility for the OECD countries, I mean, to be more independent, because as we know, there is no effect for this uncertainty, to be more independent, I mean, not depend on the USA in the future. And if there is no impact like this, do you think also some of the Muslim countries in the world will be rise actually, and also will be take part in the global economic circumstance? And if it is rise, which country it is? Maybe if there is like a forecasting about that. This is my question for Prof. Nias. My second question to Prof. Sahara actually, because you mentioned about the agriculture industry in Indonesia. My question is, because right now we have the new president in Indonesia, and also they face the uncertainty for the economic. Do you think that the vision of our president will achieve in terms of like self-sufficiency in food, or we call it swasembada, or if it's possible, how that it comes actually? And because you are the only speaker from Indonesia, I just want to ask, 1 month ago, Indonesia has made a negotiation with a USA, and there is nothing that they got actually, and the tariff still remains same. Do you think that Indonesia has no power, has no competitive advantage to negotiate with USA, and why this happened? And also we can say that there are a lot of requirement from the USA, like queries to check something like that. Do you think that Indonesia has no power about this? My last question to Prof. Sandre actually, because as we know, this tariff actually between USA and also in China. I just want to ask you, do you think who will win this trade war or this tariff war? Is it China or maybe is it USA? And in the 5 years, how do you think this global uncertainty, it will be like the same, or maybe there is like a good condition? And the people said that, the economists said that maybe in the future, maybe in 5 or to 10 years, China will become the new leader of economy. Do you agree with that? And then what's the reason? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananta, for the questions. So to recap, I guess the first questions for Prof. Sandre, this is about the diversity in ASEAN countries in terms of the export commodities and how they should respond. I guess you already mentioned it.
Thank you. The first question is on ASEAN centrality. When you look at Trump thinking, it's not the tariff that ASEAN is worried about. The whole narrative that we have is how ASEAN uses the geo-economics based on the market and based on the rule-based to develop all its framework. So whether we have the AFTA, whether the ASEAN +1 FTAs, or even the RCEP itself, all our principles are based on WTO market-based principles. So we are not worried about Trump imposing the reciprocal tariff, but completely abandoning the rule-based trade area means there's nothing to negotiate, which is actually related to the second question, which is the NTMs. So when you go and sit down and negotiate with Trump, Trump just wanted to negotiate about the tariff. And there is no baseline, no rules, and even he can break the rules. So fairly it's not very clear what you are negotiating with US itself. So ASEAN centrality is very critical for ASEAN, which basically means that 85% of the trade ASEAN has to consolidate. And that consolidation is what's going to give us a growth within ASEAN itself. And that is why they will quickly release the AEC 2045 vision that actually create a stronger coalition and stronger rule-based trading area itself. So when ASEAN came out, it's very clear. You want to negotiate together, you want to negotiate based on rule-based, and you want to based on the market-based principle itself, which is driven by the businesses themselves. Is very critical for us. So keep in mind, Trump, other than this, is going to start sectorial tariff, which is your question. That is going to disband and create more issues for us. For example, he is going to impose a different tariff on pharmaceutical products, different tariff on electronic. Now it's a baseline, it's straightforward baseline, Cambodia 48 and so on. So he's going to start with sectorial. That means he's going to hit Indonesia in a different sector, you will hit on rice, you will hit on electronics, different sectors. And these sectors will vary across different countries. To create more decoupling of our GVC, East ASEAN GVC itself, which means that we need to consolidate ourselves very fast. Thank you.
You want to comment about the geopolitical wars?
The NTMs, that's a good question, no? So when you look at, that's the reason why when you look at the free trade agreement, there are 20 chapters in a free trade agreement. Tariff is only one chapter, trade and goods. There are 20 chapters, including the rules of origin. No? So the idea of rules of origin, dispute settlement, trade remedies, and thinking about behind border issues are very critical for us. It's all rule-based. So for example, multinationals can come and produce a domestic economy. That is mode 3. Under mode 3, if I give you equal treatment as my national firms, you cannot go and pollute my economy. You need to create backward and forward linkages. You cannot work on enclaves. So we set up proper rules and regulation when the foreigners come in, how we're going to treat them. They must follow our rules and follow the free trade agreement rules. At the same time, our local firms must compete with them. That's what the competition policy is. So a free trade agreement is not about tariff. It's about creating liberalization, opening up a border in a systematic and a clear, constructive manner that benefits all of us. So a free trade agreement also has a statement about shared vision and shared growth. That's why RCEP is very important for us. This is a living agreement. So the question of NTMs is very, very critical for us. So Trump doesn't want to deal with any of those things. That leads us to the state-owned enterprise. Our import substitution for export promotion is actually based on promoting state-owned enterprise. It doesn't mean you have a state-owned enterprise, you cannot join WTO or cannot compete. You need to clearly state in a competition law how you're going to compete and what level of competition you're going to have, how transparent you are. So we set up sovereign funds, we set up our state-owned enterprise, we have government-linked corporations. Even Singapore has state-owned enterprise and government-linked corporations. Government invests, but from a market-based principle, it's very transparent. In China, Vietnam, you also have state-owned enterprise. They are part of CPTPP. So again, the competition law sets very clearly how competition is going to take place. Everybody can participate in trade itself. It's very critical for us. So that's why we need a free trade agreement. So just not what the tariff, and tariff is just a weaponizing trade for Trump. He's not interested in the other things. Why? US has very high NTMs. Very high, very difficult to enter their market. And very expensive to enter their market. He doesn't want to discuss any of those things. So keep in mind that free trade actually liberalizes and allows small countries to actually participate in a trade in a well-constructed and in a shared vision itself. Do you want me to address the last one?
Oh, yeah, please.
That's an interesting question, right? Interesting question about US and China. This conflict about US and China, we already know 15 years ago when we actually initiated the TPP. The idea of TPP is to create a shared vision globally to bring US in a global framework and a rule-based framework, because we know with China emerging, it is going to shift out. So what we wanted is a TPP with ASEAN playing a role, and East Asia selected, and we want an RCEP. I was involved in ASEAN plus 3 and ASEAN plus 6 framework to set up and support the ASEAN ministers. That was done 20 years ago. So every experts came in and we put out together we put out a proposal. So ASEAN decided to adopt ASEAN plus 6. That includes India. So we wanted these two frameworks to come together, and then we want to unify that at the APEC level. That's our vision. APEC level include Russia, and then we include China and so on and so forth. And that vision is very important for us. So when TPP didn't go in, and then we have CPTPP, we still put a provision for US to come back. But Trump said he's not going to come back. He's not going to come back into TPP. So we end up with this bipolar system with the US one side as a consumption, and then you have China as a producer, and we are aligned with both sides. No? So with Trump coming out and abandoning the rule base, we're going to have a multipolar system. That means we have polar system that one big polar will be in East Asia, not driven by China. It will be driven by a rule-based trading area. That means even with the polar, we can have small groups like ASEAN and so on and so forth, actually managing the rule base. We all agreed on the rule base. Then you have the European Union, they already have a rule base. And theirs is a higher level because institutions converge. And the third one is we want to see how US is going to converge. Because US doesn't agree with Mexico and Canada. And Mercosur is not coming through. So very fragmented thing is going to happen there. So we're going to manage, and then ASEAN want to sign the free trade with European Union. And ASEAN Singapore already said we want European Union to come into CPTPP. So that means a multipolar system together. Africa have its own African Union free trade agreement. So fairly you're going to see multipolar system, and then the system will trade, and within the system you're going to have technology moving more freely. More freely. We're going to share. And that idea of a product, Apple will have a different product for different multipolar system. That means Apple will have a product that will produce in US very expensive because it's already imposed 25%. Then we're going to have a product here that will move around among ourselves. But the interesting part about trade is only three things: movement of goods, movement of people, and movement of capital. You cannot stop. So people are going to move. So when it's very expensive to live in US multipolar, people from there are going to move to East Asia, and they're going to live here. Movement of people, you cannot stop them. So you're going to see movement of people, and that movement of people will create more convergence. That's what you hope. So I can see that kind of vision appearing faster and faster. And this vision is not only articulated by me. There are other people already start thinking of this. Recently, Richard Baldwin has put out a book on how to manage this Trump reciprocal tariff. It's not the tariff that you're worried about. It's the rule-based trade that came exactly what the former governor mentioned, to harmonize, to avoid geopolitical tension and create more economic and shared vision. That's the role of the UN. That's the role of the WTO. That's the role of the World Bank and IMF. But all this has been abandoned by him. So when he's abandoned by that, then he is going to be isolated by himself. And how he's going to consolidate that one it will emerge. Like there is some emergence with UK, but our emergence is very strong. With RCEP, and I already can see China is making a move stronger into RCEP, and they want to consolidate this. And then we're going to bring the Gulf countries into this. So country like Cambodia already signed, and UAE, FTA UAE. So again, Indonesia already have. So we're going to consolidate ourselves stronger this time. So fairly, we only need to manage that 16% of trade with the US. Fairly, we will consolidate ourselves. So it's not China and US conflict that you're worried about. It's the rule-based trade, which China is aligning more to compared to US. That is the strange part of the way we are growing now.
Thank you, Professor Sandri. I would like to invite Professor Sarah to answer questions. First, I think it's about again, ASEAN diversity and to what extent Indonesia might be exposed to this tariff term.
Oh, this is the question from Mbak Zulfa, yeah? Yes. Yes, Mbak Zulfa, Indonesia actually includes at the high risk position if we do nothing, actually. As I explained previously, that we import a lot agri-food products from US and also from China. While, you know, there is a high tension between US and also China, while US implement the reciprocal tariffs, yeah, it will also impact on the price of the soybean. We import a lot soybean, and then we import a lot maize, and also wheat. With wheat, we import 100% from outside. And then another is maize, garlic, beef, and etc. And then related to import, we rely on the palm oil. Palm oil, we know, has a significant contribution to the export to the value of export in Indonesia. So based on this situation, the reciprocal tariffs, we know, will impact on the agri-food supply chain at the global level, and then will also have increasing the cost and also the price of agri-food products. And then in Indonesia, the inflation from imported food will increase, leading to increase in inflation from the volatile food. So I think maybe it can answer your question.
Thank you, Professor. There is one more question from the floor. It's about self-sufficiency policy. To what extent it's possible in the context of
Do you mean rice self-sufficiency? Yes, for the rice self-sufficiency, we believe that Indonesia can achieve it. Because the Indonesian government allocated, a lot of funding, to implement several programs, including extensification and also intensification programs. And we know that Indonesia currently try to establish more than 3 million of new rice fields in Indonesia. And then we know that the production of rice in Indonesia increased significantly. But as I mentioned previously, that we not only focus on the rice as the staple, because from the consumption side, the demand for high agriculture products, particularly from high middle income class, like fruits, vegetables, protein source, and etc., will increase significantly. So if we only focus on the staple food, yes, the import of rice will reduce, but the import of high value agriculture products will increase significantly, and it will also leading to the trade deficit in agri-food sector, particularly from high value agriculture products.
Thank you.
He also has one question related to the position of Indonesia.
Yes.
So related to the position of Indonesia, yes, you are right that we are included as the small open economy. So our power, of course, less than US, United States, China, and Uni Europa and other big country, Russia, Japan, and etc. So in such situation, when we try to negotiate, data is very important. It is important for delegation of Indonesia to provide the data. For example, Trump always mentioned that America experienced deficit in trade for goods, but he never mentioned about the surplus that America obtained from the service trade. We know that the trade is not only include the good, but also include the service sector. So if we combine actually the service sectors, the service trade, and also the good trades between Indonesia and United States, I believe that the deficit experienced by US with Indonesia is not as big as Trump mentioned. We know that for the service sector, we import a lot of film from music, film, Google, and also software, game from America. And Trump never considered about that. And then if we can provide the data, we import a lot the software, game, and extra other service sector, including education sector from America, and then maybe they can also consider that the trade deficit is not as bad as Trump mentioned. And also another thing is it is also important to provide the data about non-tariff measures, because non-tariff measure is one reason Trump imposed the reciprocal tariffs. And in such situation, we can also provide the data that the NTM's incident in Indonesia less than 300, while United States imposed NTMs more than 4,000 incidents. So I think it is important to discuss with which NTMs, which regulation in Indonesia that can inhibit the entry of goods from the US to Indonesia. I think that's all.
Thank you, Professor Sarah. Professor Nias, I think some questions related with OIC, whether OIC can be more independent, like compared to the US.
Thank you. So I think I remember the question. It was about the rich part of the Muslim world. The Arab countries that are oil rich, they have unique situation in the sense that they are not immediately affected by Donald Trump's tariff regime, in the sense that they have been only slapped with baseline tariff. And then also we have 5 to 6 countries in Central Asia, majority of which have also enjoyed a favorable response from Donald Trump, at least for the time being. This brings up a substantive question that, well, what should be the future economic orientation of countries within the Muslim world? So we have, on one hand, a small group of very rich oil endowed countries, and then we have others that are resource poor. And here I want to actually bring up the issue of Arab Spring, because one reason why the Arab Spring happened was because of citizen frustration over a mismatch between their capabilities and aspirations. Throughout the Arab world, particularly in oil-rich countries, there is an absence of private sector. A private sector that is specializing in manufacturing goods. So citizens rely on public sector for jobs and all that. And that's where the mismatch is, that, well, these public sectors are not creating enough jobs for citizens, and then they're being put on social transfer using oil rents. So the aspiration within the Arab world is that they want really modern economy for their countries. And that demands a shift away from natural resources, oil-based economy and all that. So the Donald Trump tariff policy is a reminder that the future of world economy is going to be a lot more uncertain. This is not going to be the only uncertainty that the world will experience. So therefore, this is a call to accelerate reform, even in countries, Muslim countries that are oil-rich, even in countries that are not immediately impacted by the tariff shock. And so I think that's where the conversation has to start, be it countries in Central Asia or be it countries in the Gulf Cooperation, GCC region. The demand for market-driven reform, the demand for industrialization has to happen. And of course, for countries within the Muslim world without resources, they have no option but to industrialize. And they do have success stories within the Muslim world in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Bangladesh. So after Malaysia, Bangladesh is a good role model, particularly because it doesn't have Indonesia's resources, and yet it has managed to become the world's second largest exporter of ready-made garments. So therefore, for countries, Muslim countries in sub-Saharan Africa with similar resource-scarce conditions, that should be an example. Was there any other question for me?
Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, I think that's.
There was
all.
one I remember about nationalism, but.
Oh yeah, about nationalism.
Did anyone?
Yeah.
So so I was reflecting on that question, and I was also thinking about not just Donald Trump, but also Narendra Modi of India. So where there is also a campaign about Make India Great, and so which is similar to Make America Great. So both leaders have actually used nationalism to stoke up support for protectionism in various forms. And so therefore, if you're thinking of a binary, I think it's a false binary, because the whole reason why we are seeing a rise of protectionism is grounded in nationalism. So nationalism is kind of the ideology around it. And we're also seeing similar tendencies in certain parts of Europe. And this again is part of a broader pattern of deglobalization, and we have seen similar trends a century ago. So the world economy goes in cycles that will, at one point we start trading intensively, we start cooperating, and then some countries move ahead of others. That creates anxiety, as I've pointed out in my lecture, that in 21st century, developed countries collectively has experienced slower rate of economic growth compared to emerging developing and middle income countries. And that is what has caused anxiety, in the sense that there has been a rebalancing of soft power, economic power, and all that, and hence the rise of nationalism, this anger against migrant workers. If you have visited Europe, if you have visited North America, you would notice that. So therefore, this is something to keep in mind, that, well, there are cycles in which capitalism progresses. The rise and fall of nations also creates geopolitical tensions, and it is in this context that we have to interpret the sudden spike in tariff rate, Donald Trump, rise of Donald Trump in the US, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nias. So I would like to open one more sessions, but it seems that our time is up. So let me conclude. I mean, we have discussed many areas and we have very productive discussions. We begin with weaponizations of trade that is imposed by the current US government through Trump policies. And of course, this has created anxieties and also uncertainties across the world, particularly on the Muslim world. And from Professor Sahara, we learn about the impacts on Indonesia commodities, you know, like there are some sectors that are very negatively affected by these Trump policies. And there are, of course, other areas that we discussed this morning. So before I close these sessions, let's give a big round of applause to our excellent speakers. Thank you for being here to share the insights. And let's close the session. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Yudo. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our first panel session on global reset, implications of Trump's policies and economic outlook 2025-2026. We would like to extend our deepest appreciation to all the distinguished panelists and our moderator for their thought-provoking perspectives and valuable contributions to the discussions.
And to formally express our gratitude, we would like to present a token of appreciations to each of our speakers and the moderator. So we respectfully invite our panelists and our moderator to come to the stage. And we also kindly invite Professor Dian Masyita, Dean of the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Islam Internasional Indonesia, to come to the stage and present the token of appreciation. Yes, so the first token of appreciation would be delivered by Prof. Dian to Prof. Sandre. Thank you very much, Prof. Give applause, everyone. And for the second token of appreciation would be delivered to Prof. Sahara. Thank you, Prof. Sahara. And the third one, token of appreciation would be delivered to Prof. Nias. Thank you very much, Prof. Nias. All right, and the last one for our moderators, Dr. Teguh Yudo Wicaksono. All right, thank you very much, and please remain on the stage, Prof. So we will have a photo group session. All right, ready? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, click. Again, 1, 2, 3, click. All right, the last one. Cheers, 1, 2, 3, cheers. All right, thank you very much to all our panelists and our moderator. Thank you very much, and please be seated as we proceed to the next agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, we will have a photo session for all participants, so please. Yeah, please, all participants to stand up. Okay, again. Right. 1, 2, 3, clicked. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3, click. One more. More cheerful, yeah? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We will now take a short break before continuing with the next part of our program. The event will resume promptly at 1:15 p.m. with our second keynote speech to be delivered by His Excellency the former Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. We kindly ask all participants to return to the venue on time, probably at 1, so that we may begin the session as scheduled. Thank you and please enjoy your break.